Panzer and Associate, Scout Galley, Book 2, written and read by Jerry Hart. Prologue. And now, the TV announcer said, the series finale of Bad Logic. Hurry up, Mom, Garth said. It's starting. I'm coming, Mom replied as she walked into the living room with a bowl of popcorn. What does series finale mean? Garth asked. Mom sighed. It means it's the last episode. Ever? Garth sounded distraught. Yes, sweet baby, ever. But why? His 8-year-old mind couldn't process this. He and Mom had been watching the show for years. How could it end? Well, she said, all things end. It's a fact of life. It's no one's fault. Garth stared at Mom for a moment. He still didn't get it. After this episode, there won't be any more? Mom combed her long blonde hair behind her ears, and Garth noticed her eyes shining more than they had been a minute ago. Was she crying? It's a sad day, sweet baby, she said. I've always loved this show, from the very first episode. She wiped at her eyes. And now it's over. After 7 years, the show is finally over. I don't think I'm ready. Garth wondered what he could do to make his mom feel better. She was clearly sad. Then it came to him. He knew what would make her feel better, because it made her laugh every time he did it. He crossed his eyes and stuck out his tongue. As soon as Mom saw it, she burst into laughter. Don't do that. Your face will get stuck that way. I don't care, he said. All right. Thank you, love. I feel better. Now let's watch the episode. They watched the opening credits. A man dressed in a skin-tight white suit approached a shiny machine. Scientists surrounded and applauded him. Garth clapped as well. He did it every time. The scientist, Dr. Mason Campbell, used the machine to travel back in time in order to prevent a catastrophic event. Unfortunately, the machine sent him back to his 5-year-old self. He remembered everything from his adulthood, and when the people around Mason looked at him, they saw a child. Mason then had to work toward preventing the event as that child. For some reason, Mason changed dramatically in looks after the second season. I still can't believe they got rid of August Dickerson, Mom said. The show hasn't been the same since. Why did they get rid of him? Garth asked. She'd never explained it to him. The woman who produced the show doesn't take criticism well. August complained about the scripts, so she replaced him. The newer Mason walked along a barren landscape alone. Nothing was going on in the episode so far. Otherwise, Mom and Garth wouldn't be conversing. But Garth had to understand. They watched as Mason approached a crater in the middle of this landscape. Something bad had happened there, but Garth didn't know what. Yet. His heart raced with the possibilities. Did Mason fail his mission? Suddenly, a boom startled the little boy. It had come from somewhere in the house rather than the TV. Mom sighed and pulled Garth closer. Your dad's home. Damn everything, Dad yelled. Taking almost all my paycheck for fucking healthcare. He walked into the living room, wearing a dirty blue shirt and matching pants. I guess the money's going to good use with you two sick fucks going to the hospital all the time. Yes, dear, Mom said. Dad suddenly stopped in place and glared at her. You getting smart with me, woman? Garth gave up trying to pay attention to the show and, instead, stared at his dad. The man was mostly bald, with light brown hair ringing his head. He reminded Garth of that loud, short man on the show Seinfeld. However, Garth liked that man. He hated his dad. "Not this shit again," Dad yelled, looking at the TV. "When are they gonna cancel this shit?" "This is the last episode," Mom said, wiping her eyes again. "Good. Goddamn nerds keep turning out this sci-fi crap. I bet they don't ever get no pussy." "The show was created by a woman." "Well, that's embarrassing, isn't it?" Dad laughed. "That's where the stink is." He went to the kitchen, mumbling. Mom smiled at her son. "Let's get back to the show." They attempted to watch in peace as Dad moved throughout the house, cursing. As the show continued, Garth grew agitated. Not at Dad, but at the program. He couldn't believe it, but he found himself bored. Mason didn't do anything of interest except constantly talk to characters who came out of nowhere. Garth jumped in surprise when Dad sat directly next to him. The boy found himself sandwiched between his parents. Dad guzzled a canned beer as he joined them in watching the show. Garth gained the courage to lean against his father, the way a son should. Even at 8 years of age, Garth knew sons shouldn't be afraid of their fathers. Dad looked down at him for a second, chuckled, but didn't place an arm around him. Garth could smell the stink of hard work, but he didn't care. It was a familiar smell. The family watched the rest of the series finale. Though it didn't get any better, Garth still enjoyed this time with his family. It was a rare occurrence to have all three in the same room without shouting or anger. Though the little boy grew sleepy, he tried to keep his eyes open. He didn't want to miss the last episode of his favorite show. He couldn't miss it. Sometime later, Mom shook him awake. "Time for bed, sweet baby." Garth rubbed his eyes. He was lying flat on the couch. Dad was gone. Garth immediately looked at the TV and saw the show was over. "Oh no!" he yelled, sitting up quickly. "It's all right," said Mom. "You can catch it again later." She rubbed her eyes. "Was it good?" he asked her. "It was what it was." She picked him up and carried him to his bed. Along the way, he saw Dad in the kitchen, drinking another beer. Dad saw him and then turned his back, shaking his head. Garth wondered wearily what that was about. After Mom placed Garth in bed, she sang to him. He smiled. She sang this song almost every night, and it was the most beautiful lullaby he'd ever heard. Whenever she tried to sing a different one, he always stopped her and asked for this song. Mom cried throughout the entire song. "What's wrong, Mom?" "I just can't believe it's over." "Did you like it?" he asked. She hadn't given him a satisfactory answer earlier. "It wasn't what I expected it to be," she said after a brief pause. "I wish it was better." "What happened to Mason?" he asked. He died, sweetie." "What?" He sat up quickly. "Lie back down. It's time for bed." "Mason died? How? Why?" "He sacrificed himself to save the world. It was a noble end." "Then why aren't you happy with it?" Mom shook her head and sighed. "I keep thinking you're too young to understand such adult things, but maybe I'm wrong. Sometimes people have to do certain things in order to make things right. Sometimes those things aren't what you want them to be." "How did you want it to end, Mom?" I wanted Mason to save the world and live. Why didn't it end that way, then? Because the show's producers had different ideas than mine. She kissed Garth's forehead. Now go to sleep and have sweet dreams. As he lay down, he watched his mom close the door slowly, smiling at him the whole time. She seemed very sad about the show, sadder than he'd ever seen her. He still couldn't believe he fell asleep during it. He felt ashamed. After a few minutes, he fell asleep again. A scream woke him up. "You stupid bitch! How could you?" It was Dad. Garth jumped out of bed and ran into the hallway. His parents' bedroom door was open. Garth ran in and saw Dad standing by his bathroom door, looking in. Garth slowly walked up to him. Dad was staring at something that angered him. He was so intent on it that he didn't notice his son until he was right next to him. By then, it was too late. Garth saw his mother in the bathtub. Her eyes were open, her skin whiter than he'd ever seen it. The water was so red. Water wasn't supposed to be red. Chapter 1. Garth ran into the comic book store and shook off the rain. The few customers looked at him with wide eyes, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Garth wasn't in the mood, so he went straight to the counter. "Is the new issue of Heroes Madness in?" he asked the cashier. "You're the one who called?" "Sure is, bud." The cashier was a striking young man who looked to be in his early 20s, around the same age as Garth. He had to be nearly 7 feet tall. He towered over Garth and appeared to work out a lot, his veiny biceps straining through his short-sleeved shirt. His chest and shoulders were also massive. The cashier disappeared behind the counter and came back up a few seconds later with a comic book in hand. The cover had a scrawny blonde boy in an orange and yellow superhero costume, walking down an alley by himself. "This is your favorite series, huh?" the cashier asked. "Yeah, I've loved it for years. I feel like I'm the only one." "Why do you feel that way?" "Well, how many people buy it?" After a moment's thought, the giant said, "You're the only one." "Exactly." He took the comic book and caressed the cover through the protective sheet. "You seem like someone who gets attached to things easily," the cashier said. Garth looked up quickly. "Is it that obvious?" "I'm Panzer," the cashier said, reaching a hand out. Garth shook it and introduced himself. His hand disappeared inside Panzer's, and he knew the large guy was taking care not to crush it. "I think obsession runs in my blood," Garth said. "Really? How so?" "My mom loved a TV show, and, well, she didn't take the finale well." He suddenly stopped talking and went back to the comic book. He reached for his wallet, but Panzer stopped him. "No charge, bud." "What? Are you serious?" "Sure, I'll take care of it." Garth wiped at his eyes, which had suddenly become watery. He couldn't believe he was crying in a comic book store. "I know it's none of my business," Panzer said quietly. "But if you need someone to talk to—" "My dad tore up all my comic books," Garth suddenly confessed. "It's been years since my mom died, and things have been shit between Dad and me. He hated my comic books. I think he hates me. I know he hated my mom." "Why don't you just move out?" Garth laughed. "Yeah, right. My dad may hate me, but he won't let me go. I'm the only family he has. He feels like Mom abandoned him." "Abandoned how?" Panzer asked. "She killed herself. God, I can't believe I'm telling you this. You must think I'm a crazy shit. Not at all. I'm a good listener. If you don't mind me asking, why did she killed herself because of the series finale, believe it or not. Your dad thinks he's a failure, Panzer said. What? I hear that people close to suicides blame themselves. He probably felt she was rubbing his failure in his face. Some men just can't handle that. I guess. Garth held up the comic book. Thanks again. I really appreciate this. He turned to leave, feeling a little better. The great comic book massacre had happened a week ago. This was his first comic book since, and he would protect it with his life. Hey, Panzer said behind him. What are you doing later tonight? Chapter 2. Simon Ferguson startled awake in his recliner when he heard the noise. Garth, is that you? He waited for a reply, but got none. You better not have gone out and gotten another damn cartoon book. I won't have those in my house. He worked his large frame out of the chair and walked toward his son's room at the end of the hall. Without knocking, he opened the door and saw his son lying in bed with headphones on. Garth removed the headphones immediately. Didn't you hear me talking at you? Simon asked. Obviously not. Garth held up the headphones. Don't get smart with me, boy. Where were you earlier? I was hanging out with friends. Simon laughed. What friends? Me, a voice said behind him. Simon spun and saw a tall, muscular boy standing there. Who are you? Sorry, sir. I'm Panzer. He wiped his hands on his pants and then held one out to shake. Simon shook and grimaced at the pressure of the grip. I was just at the toilet. Simon looked back at his son. You better not be a fag, because I won't have that in my house. Your son isn't a fag, Mr. Ferguson, Panzer said. Are you a fag? Simon asked the giant. Panzer shrugged. I don't like labels. I'll take that as a yes. If you two want to practice anything, you'll have to do it outside. Panzer grinned, but didn't move. He simply stared at Simon. There was something in the boy's eyes Simon didn't like, so he backed away and went to his bedroom. He lay on the bed and closed his eyes. Moments later, he was asleep. Well, Garth said as he opened his window, that lovely man is my father. Panzer pulled out 2 joints and joined him at the window. He seems like a delight. He lit his joint. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer truthfully. Okay? Okay. Garth lit his joint and waited. Do you wish your dad was dead? Garth coughed on the smoke. What? Panzer stared him straight in the eyes. Do you wish your dad was dead? He repeated slowly. Garth shrugged. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be sad if he died. That's not what I'm asking. Why are you asking me that? Garth said angrily. Are you going to kill him or something? If you want me to. Garth stared at his new friend. He couldn't tell if Panzer was joking. Besides, Panzer added, if he's dead, you can be free to do whatever you want. Nothing will tie you down and keep you here any longer. Don't you want that? Garth was afraid to admit he did want that. But did he want it like this? He put out his joint and said, I wish he was dead. Simon woke again, surrounded by darkness, but he only had a moment to register this. He was quickly lifted from the bed and held in midair. Then he felt the pressure. Something was squeezing him around the torso. It lasted for an unbearable amount of time, and then it was gone. Then it came again, but it only lasted for a second. Then it came again, then disappeared. Simon heard his breath escape his mouth with each squeeze. His heart raced and he felt sick. He suddenly dropped through darkness and fell on something soft. His bed. "Sorry to break your heart," a deep voice said from somewhere above him. Simon tried to get up, but his racing heart kept him motionless. Had he really been that frightened? "Who?" he tried to say, but he couldn't catch a breath. He clutched at his left arm as a pain shot through it. "I'm—" He tried to say he was having a heart attack, but he couldn't get the words out. Before he died, he could have sworn he saw two people in the room with him, both with bright smiles. Chapter 3. It had been a few months since Garth's dad died of a massive heart attack. Garth sat in the small living room of Panzer's apartment, playing video games and wondering how his life could change so drastically. His dad hadn't paid for the house for a while, nor did he have life insurance. Garth couldn't believe how irresponsible Dad had been. If Mom had been around, this never would have happened. Thank God for Panzer. He had taken Garth in. He was like a guardian angel, an angel who lived in a crummy, tiny apartment. The front door opened, and Panzer kneeled in. He was so tall that his head touched the top frame. "Honey, I'm home," the giant said. Garth laughed. "That's dumb. Where were you? It's past midnight." "I talked to my dad." Panzer walked into the living room and set down a gem bag. "Your dad? You've never mentioned him before. How's he doing?" Panzer shrugged. "He's all right. Just an old man who's down on his luck." "Did he want money from you or something?" "Something." Panzer sat down next to Garth on the futon, causing it to groan under his weight. "Your favorite woman is in the news." Garth paused the game and looked at him. "Who?" "Cassandra Fairchild." Garth grinded his teeth. "She's not my favorite woman." He could tell he'd sounded more forceful than usual because Panzer's eyes widened. "I was just joking, bud. Did you hear, though?" "Hear what?" "She sold her production company to a major studio." Garth laughed. "Good. She doesn't deserve it." "That's not all," Panzer said. "The studio canceled the animated show she produced, and now a lot of people are out of work." Garth narrowed his eyes. "Are you fucking serious?" he asked quietly. "Yep. Just another check on her list of good deeds." Panzer laughed at his own joke, but Garth was fuming. "All she does is ruin people's lives." "Yep," Panzer agreed. "Someone should really put her in her place, don't you think?" "I guess." "You know what I also heard? She's going to a convention in Texas in May. It'll be her first convention appearance ever." "So?" "You could meet her." Garth's palms grew sweaty. "Why would I want to meet her?" "Give her a piece of your mind, bud. Air your grievances. I don't know. Are you really going to pass up the opportunity to meet the woman who killed your mom?" Garth felt suddenly short of breath. "She didn't kill my mom." "Didn't she? After all, your mom killed herself after watching that series finale that Fairchild wrote and directed. Are you seriously telling me you don't find her even the slightest bit responsible for your mom's suicide? Garth had never considered that possibility. I don't think talking to her would help, he finally said. Maybe not. Something more drastic than... Panzer smiled. Like what? You should kill her. What? Garth yelled. Fairchild ruined not just your life, but many others. She killed your mom and put all those poor animators out of work with her incredibly awful decisions. She needs to be stopped. I agree, but killing her? It's the only way to stop her, bud. Is it? Is it really? You're talking about taking a human life. I still can't tell if you're being serious or not, Panzer. I'm very serious. I'm not talking about a total hands-on murder. Just plant a bomb near her or something. A bomb? Garth asked. That's pretty specific. I know you can make one. Aren't you majoring in mechanics or something? Well, yeah, I could probably make a bomb. Garth suddenly stopped talking. The more he spoke about this with Panzer, the more enticing it sounded. Have you killed other people besides my dad? Panzer shrugged. Just a few, but they deserved it. Garth remembered the night his dad died. He'd said, offhandedly, that he wished the man was dead, and Panzer had offered to kill him and make it look like natural causes. Of course, Garth thought he was joking. At first. But why a bomb? Garth suddenly asked, trying to ignore this strange new side to his roommate. Why not just shoot her or poison her tea? You could do those, but a bomb sends a bigger message, I think. It tells the world that this woman did something bad enough to deserve a death like this. It really does, doesn't it? Garth rubbed his chin. He really liked the idea of blowing up Fairchild. Though he'd never built a bomb before, he was certain he could do so. When's the convention again? In a few months, May. We'll need plane tickets, and I doubt it's cheap flying from California to Texas. I have money now, Panzer said proudly. Garth looked at him curiously. Why do you want to kill her so much? What makes you think I do? This was your idea. Garth couldn't help but laugh nervously. Panzer sighed. I just think it's unfair what's happened to you. Your mom and dad died, and now those poor people lost their jobs. Someone has to take the power back from Cassandra Fairchild, don't you think? Garth nodded. I really do. Great. We'll get tickets, and then you can build the bomb after we get to Texas. Fairchild dies, and all will be right with the world. Later that night, as Garth lay on the futon, his mind raced with the thought of killing Fairchild. He'd never realized just how truly horrible that woman was until Panzer opened his eyes. She deserved to pay for her actions toward people. She hurt the people who worked for her, and she killed his mom. He truly believed that now. You're going to die, Cassandra. I promise. Just before he fell asleep, he heard a muffled noise coming from Panzer's bedroom. Garth wasn't sure, but it sounded to him like his giant friend was crying. Chapter 4. Excerpt from Weird Minds Sci-Fi Magazine. 13 years ago, more than 30 million people watched one of TV's all-time biggest sci-fi sensations sign off the air with a final answer to Dr. Mason Campbell's Will He Save the World saga. He did, in a twist that surprised and angered fans. In the May issue of Weird Minds, we revisited the Popular Adventures finale and discussed the challenges of creating a final episode that stunned. Below, in a bonus Q&A, creator/executive producer Cassandra Fairchild and original star August Dickerson chat about plotting the Bad Logic finale, tackling fans' expectations, and much more. When did you begin working on the finale? Cassandra Fairchild. It was different than other shows, only because we had several years where we thought this was going to be the last year. August, did you watch the finale? August Dickerson. Oh yeah, I watched it. What did you think? Well, I definitely understand the backlash after the finale. It seemed a little out of left field. Cassandra, did you watch a bunch of finales to see how other showrunners had handled them? We spent some time talking about finales that we loved and ones that seemed well suited to their shows. They actually ended up not applying to us. August, at what point did you realize you weren't going to be in Season 3? It was midway through Season 2. We started with great scripts, considering they were written really quickly. The network wasn't happy with the first season and wasn't sure if it would renew us for another. When it finally did, the scripts were written. The network, in its infinite wisdom, suddenly decided to go for a more standalone format rather than serialized. That way, people could come in during any episode and be able to follow it. And you weren't okay with that? Not at all. I felt it dumbed down the show and insulted the intelligence of the fans. I shared my thoughts with the producers, and they fired me. Television is a harsh business. I had shareholders to answer to. We wanted to tell the story of Mason Campbell and his heroic journey to save the world from an apocalypse. If we didn't play by the network's rules, we wouldn't have been able to tell that story at all. It was nothing personal. This is the first time you two have been in the same room in a while, hasn't it? Nearly 20 years. Notice I'm here and not my replacement. Cassandra, do you ever look back at the show and wish you'd done anything differently? I'm sure everyone looks back with regret. I'm personally proud of what we did. There were a few times when I thought, we couldn't do better than that. Any specific episode where you thought that? Probably the one where Mason ends up in the body of his baby self. It sounded good at the time. Did it? I hear you're both going to a convention in Dallas this summer. Yes, I'm very excited. It'll be my first appearance. I've done many conventions over the years. The fans are amazing. Cassandra, why the sudden appearance? Oh, I can't say. I do have a special announcement that I will reveal exclusively at the convention. August, is it safe to say you have something to do with the announcement? Not at all. I have no idea what's going on. I'm just here because my replacement turned down the interview. I will say I'm as excited as everyone else to find out what Cassandra has in store. Chapter 5. I hate traffic, Scout Galley shouted as she sat in her car on I-30. The sun beat down on her, and though she had her windows down, she was still burning up. What is the point of traffic? I'll bet absolutely nothing is causing this. Except stupid people, Duke said from the back seat. Turn the air conditioner on. No, every time I do, the service engine light comes on. I don't see why it would, Duke said. The air conditioner has nothing to do with the engine. Really? She looked at him through the rearview mirror. If I turn on the air and the light comes on, can I punch you in the nuts? Sure. Scout turned the dial and air blew from the vents, warm at first, but slowly growing cooler. She and Duke rolled up their windows as the cars in front of them moved a few inches. "Why do I have to sit in the back anyway?" Duke asked. "I need the front seat for my cashews." As she said this, she reached over to the large bag she'd bought at a gas station before hitting the freeway. "That's what laps are for, bitch," Duke replied with a laugh. "My lap has my energy drink in it." "That's what cup holders are for." "My cup holder sucks. Every time I take a turn, drinks go flying." Scout looked at the mirror to see Duke adjusting his thick, black-rimmed glasses. "Maybe you shouldn't take turns at 50 miles an hour," he said. Scout laughed as she took a sip of her energy drink. She studied her reflection for a second, adjusting her long brown hair out of her face to expose a freckled nose and dark green eyes. She then looked at her dashboard, waiting for the light to come on. She looked farther ahead and to the right, where the Sainsbury Hotel stood. She grinned as she imagined the weekend ahead. In her 22 years, she'd never been to a convention, and she couldn't help but imagine hundreds of geeks dressed in costumes. "You know," Duke said, "cashews and energy drinks don't mix. You're going to feel like you have a rock in your stomach." "Why didn't you tell me that sooner?" "Because you made me sit in the back." "Fair enough." Traffic finally got moving again. Scout took the exit that led to the hotel. The Sainsbury was a large, luxurious place with 12 floors. Though Scout hated driving to Dallas, she loved looking at the skyscrapers, the way the sun reflected off the windows, or, if it was night, the way the city lit up with man-made light. Now that she was here, she was going to enjoy her weekend. If it got her mind off the anniversary, it was all good. Nearly a year ago, she'd been part of a bizarre series of events involving a man wearing a hoodie and zombie mask. The man had terrorized Scout and her friends, had even killed one of them. The killer turned out to be her friend and roommate, Jaren. Scout still couldn't believe he'd been capable of murder. She'd known him for years and had considered him one of her best friends. Of course, she hadn't found out until much later that Jaren had killed his own mother when he was a child. That had been an accident, though. He'd tried to shoot his abusive father, but the man had jumped out of the way at the last second, leaving Jaren's mom in the gun's path. Jaren claimed he took on the persona of the masked man to scare Duke away from a movie Duke decided to direct. The plot was based on a murder that had occurred on the same night as Duke's indie film premiere at Scout's Theater. The premiere had been a disaster, putting Duke in a fragile state of mind. News of the murder had only ignited his imagination. Unfortunately, that night also had a profound effect on someone else. Ricky Nelson had survived that night of horror, but her boyfriend had not. Ricky's ex attacked them, tied them to chairs, and stabbed Ricky's boyfriend to death right in front of her. All while wearing the costume Jaren would later don. When Ricky found out about Duke's movie, she took action. She and Jaren joined forces to put an end to the movie, one way or another. Jaren had only wanted to scare his friends into stopping. He likened Duke to his own abusive father. Suffice to say, Jaren had issues with unsympathetic bullies. Now Jaren and Ricky were in prison. Jaren for the murder of one of Scout's friends, and Ricky for attempted murder. Scout hoped Jaren rotted for what he did to Gina Mathers. As Scout pulled into the hotel's multi-level garage, she thought of her best friend Taylor. Gina had been Taylor's girlfriend, and Jaren stabbed her in the heart right in front of Scout. As far as Scout knew, Ricky had only killed her murderous ex after she escaped captivity, but that had been enough to set off something in the young woman. The psyche is extremely fragile, and certain people handle stress in certain ways. What followed was weeks of hell, something straight out of a horror movie. Scout loved watching horror, but living it was a completely different story. She, Duke, and Taylor had almost died during the final act at Duke's house. But Taylor had come to the rescue. She'd called the cops, who'd arrived just as Ricky was raising the knife that would have ended Duke's and Scout's lives. Talk about a close call. Duke had a scar on his left shoulder to remind him of that night. Scout shivered as she parked. As they got out of the car, Duke saw her face. "You're thinking about last year?" he asked. She nodded. "Well, don't. Think of all the fun we'll have this weekend. There are going to be so many hot chicks in cool costumes. By the process of deduction, some of them have to be lesbians." "Process of deduction, eh?" Scout shook her head. "Maybe I'll meet someone," she added sarcastically. They pulled their bags from the trunk and made their way to the ground floor, where the entrance to the strange world awaited. Chapter 6. "Hurry up with that," Panzer said from the hotel bed. Garth rolled his eyes and cursed. "What was that?" Panzer asked. "Nothing, Panzer," Garth replied. "I'm almost done." He looked over his shoulder at the colorfully dressed young man on the bed. Panzer was flipping through channels, apparently bored out of his mind. But how could he be bored? He was a superhero. Well, he was dressed as one. So was Garth, for that matter, though he wasn't nearly as tall or muscular as Panzer. Panzer was 6'7" and around 300 pounds now. He'd put on a few dozen pounds of muscle over the past few months. He wore yellow spandex with blue Speedos, cape, and gloves. Garth, on the other hand, was 5'5" and 110 pounds, with yellow spandex and red Speedos, gloves, and cape. He looked like a skeleton in a costume, basically. Garth would never admit it, but he was jealous of his humongous friend. He had the looks, the brawn, and the sex appeal. All Garth had was the brains, which was why he was putting the finishing touches on the bomb in the corner of the hotel room. He'd built it completely out of plastic, using ingredients one could find in a kitchen. The bomb was very small, the size of a gaming console, but it definitely looked suspicious. Garth didn't want to be seen carrying a small plastic square box with 2 compartments of liquid on each side and a small electrical trigger in the center. But Panzer said he had a plan for carrying it in plain sight without anyone noticing. Making the bomb was Panzer's idea, after all. "Everything will change after this weekend," Panzer said as he got up and walked to the bathroom. He left the light off, but the door open. "Just you wait, associate." Garth heard what sounded like water from a fire hose shooting into the toilet. "A giant body and a monster dick," he murmured. "Some fucks have all the luck. And I'm not the associate, you are." "What was that?" Panzer called from the bathroom. "Nothing," Garth replied, and then whispered, "Damn your ears." Panzer laughed as he pissed. "I might check out the gym while I'm here. I could really use a workout." Garth ignored that last part. The behemoth was right, though. Things would change. This was their first time outside California, and their best chance to meet Cassandra Fairchild. As if it wasn't already obvious, Garth didn't like the woman. He was making a bomb, after all. This was Miss Fairchild's first convention, and the best chance for him to get close to her. Though Garth had held a grudge against the woman, he wouldn't have thought of killing her if not for Panzer. Panzer was an interesting guy, and so difficult to pin down, personality-wise. On one hand, he was a sex fiend who obsessed over sculpting his body to peak physical condition. On the other hand, he was a geek who loved comic books and anime. Garth owed Panzer everything. Garth stopped what he was doing and simply sat there on his knees, looking at the plastic box filled with blue and green liquid. What was he doing? His heart hammered in his chest as he truly thought this through. He only wanted to kill Fairchild. He'd built the bomb so it would create a close proximity explosion. If he played his cards right, no one other than Fairchild would die. Panzer came back out and patted Garth's shoulder softly. Just make sure that, he pointed to the bomb, is ready. What if we're caught? No one will catch us. There aren't any fingerprints on the bomb, and no one will ever see us with it. We'll plant the bomb at the panel, watch it go off, and then leave with everyone else. It's the perfect plan. It's your plan, Garth said quietly. Exactly. Panzer smiled. Fine. Garth tightened the diode in the center of the box. We have to make sure this is tightened all the way, or the explosion will be worse than we want. How much worse? Panzer asked. Enough to take out many floors above the explosion. Not below? No, it wasn't designed that way. Interesting, Panzer said quietly. Chapter 7. Scout groaned when Duke told her they would have a roommate. He hadn't told her this when he asked for the money to book the room for the weekend, though she should have known something was up when her portion turned out to be so low. She and Duke got on an elevator and rode up with a couple of girls dressed as sexy elves. Scout tried to keep her eyes off their bared midriffs and extremely short skirts. One of the girls caught Scout's eyes and smiled. Scout smiled back. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor. Scout and Duke's room was nestled in a corner at the end of a long, cream-colored hallway. Hotel guests passed her and Duke, most dressed in some kind of costume, others apparently regular people who had nothing to do with the convention. 312, Duke said as he walked up to the door straight ahead. He slid the key card into the slot and pushed the door open with his foot. Scout was a little disappointed when she saw the room. It wasn't much nicer than other rooms she'd seen, but at least it had 2 beds, and it was fairly large. There was a nice sitting chair by the window and air conditioner, and a large TV directly across from the beds. There was an open suitcase on the closest bed. Hello? Duke called to the seemingly empty room. Hello back, a flamboyant voice replied. A head popped out from around the corner on the left, where the bathroom must have been. A young African-American boy with curly platinum hair smiled at them. Who's this cute little thing? He asked, looking at Scout. This thing is Scout, Duke replied, tossing his suitcase onto the bed closest to the window. Scout, this is Dante. They shook hands. Dante said, I like that name. It's so butch. Dante, she said, has anyone told you that you look like Wesley Snipes from Demolition Man? All the time, girl, he laughed. I like what he calls me better, Duke told Scout. He calls me Maine. Scout laughed. She was already enjoying this trip. Duke lay down on his bed and sighed with relief. That drive took a lot out of me. Scout's jaw dropped. What the fuck ever? I didn't see your ass behind the wheel. I'm almost too tired to go down to the main floor, he said, his eyes closed. Scout went to the window and looked down at the pool. Dante and I can go without you. We have our passes. We don't need you. Isn't that right, Dante? You tell it, girl. Don't lose them, Duke said as he sat up. They will kick you out faster than Dante at a clan meeting. Isn't that right, Dante? Man, you better hush. Scout laughed as she made sure her orange pass was secure around her neck. I'd pay $50 for this bitch, she said. I ain't losing it. Duke held up his arms. Help me up. Scout pulled him to his feet and said, Let's do this. After taking the elevator to the ground floor, Duke, Scout, and Dante rounded a corner and stepped into a large area filled with people and booths. The Oriya wing was the largest room Scout had ever seen. The ceiling was higher up than she would have expected. The Rygelia wing, across the hall, was under construction. An escalator was just outside the Oriya wing. Just past that lay a downward ramp surrounded by windows. She looked down and figured that ramp led to even more wonders. The trio took a step onto the floor, but Scout stopped almost immediately. Whoa! Do you feel that? She stood with her hands in front of her. Is the floor moving? Duke looked down. No? It feels like it's bouncing. Crappy foundation, Duke said. Just like the Rygelia wing across the hall. It's fine. Scout followed the boys as they walked toward a booth selling comic books. She browsed through them and saw a few she really liked. She decided to buy only one, though, considering everything on the table was expensive. Dante was a few booths down, taking a picture of an incredibly skinny boy dressed in a black, skeleton-painted leotard. The boy had purple dreadlocks and was quite eye-catching. Scout wondered if he ever ate, or if he just had an incredibly high metabolism. She also wondered if the locks were real or just a wig. She decided not to ask. Dante rejoined Duke and Scout, and they walked through the myriad booths, taking pictures with their phones. Scout noticed a lot of orange badges on the floor. She picked one up. I guess these really are easy to lose, she told Duke. You should invite Taylor, he said. No, really? She had invited her earlier, but Taylor had declined because she was broke. Yeah, you're holding a free pass. This might just be the thing she needs to get over. You know, that bitch. Scout grinned. Taylor had just broken up with her girlfriend of nearly a year. Since Scout and Taylor were roommates, Scout had the distinct displeasure of hearing their constant arguments. Taylor's girlfriend had been the most high-maintenance heifer she'd ever met. Scout couldn't judge, though. Her relationship hadn't lasted nearly as long. After the deadly events last year, Scout and Taylor had considered themselves lucky to meet people and yet retain their own friendship. Taylor had been a difficult friend to Scout, constantly picking fights for the most petty of reasons. Scout still wasn't sure why she'd put up with it, but after Taylor saved her life, the two hadn't had any problems. Yet. Perhaps this was exactly what Taylor needed. She was into anime and video games. She would love this place, even more so since it wouldn't cost her a cent. Scout pulled out her cell and texted her. She got a reply a few minutes later. I would love to, but my car is acting up. No problem, Scout replied. I have to work tonight. I can pick you up. That sucks. Just tonight. I'm off for the rest of the weekend. But yeah, I can drive you here. Awesome. I'm so excited. Scout smiled at the typo as she put the phone back in her pocket. She was about to tell Duke the good news when large yellow arms wrapped around her and lifted her from the floor. Way up off the floor. Then the arms spun her around quickly, making her dizzy. Her back was pressed against something very hard. She felt like she was being crushed. Whoever was spinning her was laughing. "What are you doing here?" he asked as he lowered her to the floor. Scout jumped away and spun around to face her attacker. Standing in front of her was a tall and possibly muscular young man in a superhero costume. "Who are you?" she asked. The man looked at her, his eyes narrowed. He tilted his head to the side. "What are you talking about?" He stopped himself. "Oh, sorry. I thought you were someone else." Remembering a line from one of her favorite movies, she said, "It's okay. I am." The giant laughed. He wore a yellow spandex suit that showed off his impressive physique. A blue cape draped down to his large calves. "I feel terrible for spinning you around like that. I'm embarrassed." "Who did you think I was?" "My sister. You look a lot like her." "Oh, that's sweet." Scout meant it. She was worried he'd say she reminded him of his girlfriend or something like that. Instead, he seemed disinterested in flirting. "I'm Scout." She offered her hand. "Panzer." He gripped her tiny hand in his large one. He was surprisingly gentle. In his other hand was a large gray hammer, painted to look like steel. "Is Panzer your superhero name?" Scout asked. "No, it's my real one, believe it or not." "I believe it," Dante said, walking up to them. He eyed the giant and seemed to like what he saw. "My name's Dante." He offered his hand as well. Panzer smiled and shook it. "Nice to meet you, Dante." "Duke here," Duke said, popping up from nowhere. Scout suppressed a laugh when she noticed he too was eyeing Panzer appreciatively. She knew her friend was hetero, but there were just some men who appealed to everyone. Panzer was clearly one of them. "Nice to meet you, Duke." Panzer shook his hand. A shorter boy with shoulder-length blonde hair walked up to Panzer and whispered something. Then he looked at the others warily. "Don't be rude," Panzer reprimanded. "Stop whispering in front of our new friends." "Hello," the blonde boy said. "Hi," Scout replied as she introduced herself. "Garth," he said. "Sorry for being rude. We're in a hurry." "It can wait," Panzer said. "Are you guys doing an act or something?" Duke asked, staring at Panzer's legs. Scout nudged her friend's arm to alert him to the fact he was being obvious. "No," Panzer said. "We're presenting a comic book to some publishers." Garth suddenly looked at him. "Cool. An original character?" Duke's eyes lit up. "What's his name?" "Or hers," Scout added. "His," Garth said with a little heat in his voice. "It's Madman." "Awesome," Duke said. "He's sexually open-minded," Panzer added, smiling at Dante. "I'm intrigued." Dante looked away and nervously scratched behind his left ear. Scout wondered if Panzer was flirting. If so, then she figured Dante would have a more interesting weekend than he'd planned. Panzer switched the hammer to his other shoulder quickly, causing Garth to hiss. "Be careful with that." Panzer stared at the little superhero, causing him to back away a step. Garth wore yellow spandex with red Speedos, gloves, and cape. He reminded Scout of fire, whereas Panzer made her think of ice. "Well," Panzer said to the trio, "we do need to be going. It was great meeting you." His eyes lingered on Dante a second longer than the others, and then he and Garth walked away, disappearing into the crowd. "Damn," Dante said. "That boy was fine." "You're almost the same height," Scout noted. "I'm 6'5". He has to be around 6'7". I love me some tall boys." "I'll bet," Duke said, coughing nervously. Scout thought about making fun of the way he'd acted around Panzer, but she decided not to. He just had a little man crush. "I need to get ready to do security," Duke said. "I can't believe I volunteered for this, but at least I get paid to be here." "I can't believe I have to drive back to Fort Worth," Scout groaned. "And then I get to drive back. Hooray for me. I'm bringing Taylor with me tonight, though." "Oh, cool. Bring back some beer." Scout rolled her eyes and walked toward the escalator. She wanted to see what was upstairs before she left. Chapter 8. "So, Mr. Garth?" Cassandra Fairchild said, staring down at the picture of Mason Campbell he had given her. "Tell me what you thought of the series finale of Bad Logic." "Sure thing, Miss Fairchild." Garth stood straighter and faked his enthusiasm. "I thought it was wonderful. The way Dr. Campbell sacrificed himself like that." He put his hand to his chest. "Wow." Miss Fairchild nodded, staring at Panzer, who stood a few feet behind and to the side of Garth. "You're one of the few people who see it that way." "That was what you were going for, right?" Garth asked, his control slipping a little. The woman had short, white hair that was done up into a bun. She smelled of vanilla and wore a lavender pantsuit. Garth wanted to vomit. She looked to the long line behind Garth. "Can I be honest with you?" she whispered. "Of course." "I was just burned out by the time we got to the last season. The writers had buried the show in plot holes. I just wanted to end it, and that was the only way I could think to do so." "Really?" Garth asked, clenching his fists. "That seems a little lazy, don't you think?" Fairchild shrugged. "The ratings had slipped dramatically by then, and I didn't think the fans were there anymore. I figured if the fans weren't there for me, then they wouldn't care so much how it all ended." She signed the photo and handed it back. "My mom was a huge fan of the show, and she was a little heartbroken by the finale." Panzer nudged him in the back, nearly sending Garth onto the table. Garth regained his stance, shaking, doing everything in his power not to crush the picture in his hands. "Thank you," he replied in a shaky voice. He turned and walked away, Panzer following close behind. "Are you all right?" Panzer asked. Garth quickly wiped tears from his eyes and said, "Yes." All the while, Panzer carried the hammer over his shoulder. Garth looked around at all the unsuspecting people, cosplayers, comic book artists, publishers, security. None of these people realized there was a bomb in Panzer's hammer. They wouldn't know until it was too late. By then, Fairchild would be dead. Panzer looked at him. "Are you ready?" the giant asked. "Not yet. I want to enjoy this place as much as I can." He took a breath and said, tomorrow night, during the special panel. Where's August Dickerson? I want to meet him. He's on a break, Panzer said quickly. Won't be back for a while. Why did you tell those people we were pitching a comic book? Because I didn't want them connecting us with Fairchild. Garth waved that away. Can I ask you for a favor? Sure, bud. Teach me how to kill with my bare hands. Garth stared at him for a moment, not saying another word. Panzer smiled. Sure thing. Scout was disappointed when she got upstairs. There was nothing but a hallway at the top of the escalator, with a few people walking around. There were a few arcade games at the end of the hall, though, but she didn't want to play any. There was also a set of doors leading into what Scout assumed was a ballroom, but no one was going in or coming out. Perhaps something was being set up in there for later? Sighing, she turned back to the escalators. She stopped just before she could get on. Standing at the bottom, staring up at her, was a man dressed in a black hoodie and matching pants. Scout couldn't see his face because he was wearing a white zombie mask. Scout backed away, her heart hammering suddenly. She recognized the costume. How could she possibly forget? It was the same one Ricky and Jaren had worn when they harassed Scout and Duke last year. It was the same costume Jaren wore when he killed Taylor's girlfriend. Scout tried to tell herself this was just a coincidence, but the figure was staring at her and no one else. And then the figure waved. That was enough for Scout. She started quickly down the escalator. The figure turned and ran away, toward the windowed ramp. When Scout got to the show floor, she looked down the ramp, but it was flooded with costumed people. She pushed through them, looking for the zombie-masked figure. She was certain the man had gone this way, but she saw no sign of him now. She sighed and turned back toward the show floor. Someone grabbed her by the shoulders. Scout screamed. "Whoa!" Dante said with a laugh. "It's just me, girl." "Dante!" Scout looked over her shoulder again, down the ramp, hoping to catch a sign of the figure, but there were still too many people. "I thought I saw someone." "Who?" "I don't know." She told him what she saw. "Creepy. You want to tell security or something?" "Maybe." All other thoughts were suddenly brushed aside when Scout saw someone walk past her. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What now?" Dante asked, looking around quickly. "That's August Dickerson." "Who?" "August Dickerson," she repeated, watching a tall man walk through the booths and people. "He played Dr. Mason Campbell in my favorite show of all time, Bad Logic." "Your favorite show is called Bad Logic?" Dante asked with a large amount of skepticism. Scout grinned at him. "The title's terrible, but the show is fantastic. It came out when I was a kid. It's the reason I love sci-fi, believe it or not. I had no idea he was going to be here." "Go say hi." Dante nudged her forward. "I can't," she said nervously as she watched August, Mr. Dickerson, take a seat at a table on the far side of the floor. "Look at me. I'm shaking." "Have you never seen a famous person before?" "Not in, well, person. This is the first convention I've ever been to." "Well, honey." He took her hand and pulled her forward. "Meeting famous people is part of the fun of conventions. They want you to talk to them." Scout allowed herself to be shoved toward Dickerson's table. He sat alone, with numerous pictures of himself from his many projects. There was no one near him, and he seemed bored as he played with his phone. He looked up as Scout accidentally bumped the table with her legs. "Hello," she said, with what she figured was a goofy grin on her face. "Hello," Dickerson replied kindly, putting his phone away. Scout couldn't think of a thing to say. She was too starstruck. "Her name is Scout," Dante said. "She's a big fan of that sci-fi show you made." "Oh," Dickerson laughed. "That's swell. I had fun making that one. Unfortunately, I didn't get invited back for the following seasons." "Why not?" Dante asked. "Because," Scout replied, "the scripts for the second season were terrible, and Mr. Dickerson called the network heads out on it, because he didn't want them to make an inferior product. So Cassandra Fairchild fired him." "Impressive," the actor said. "Not many people know the real story like that. And please, call me August." "August?" Scout tried the name out. It felt natural, and she felt much more comfortable. "Would you like an autograph?" August asked. "Sure." $20. Dante laughed. Scout had fun with the actor, and Dante took a picture of the two with her phone. The creepy masked figure was but a faint memory by the time Scout returned to her room an hour later. She stepped on the elevator alone and pressed the 3 button. The door started to close, but at the last second, a gloved hand shot through. The doors reopened, and a costumed figure stepped on. Scout stepped backward as the zombie-masked figure pressed the 2 button and stood with its back to her. Scout leaned against the wall, her breathing heavy. The figure merely stood there, ignoring her as the elevator rose. Scout leaned forward to get a better look at the mask, but the figure turned slightly and stared at her. Scout could barely see the whites of the eyes before the doors opened. The figure stepped off and quickly walked away. The doors started to close again. Scout opened them and stepped off the elevator. She made her way around several corners before she found the costumed figure walking quickly down the hall. Scout started to jog after the person as he or she rounded another corner. Just as Scout reached the middle of the hall, someone grabbed her shoulder from behind. Scout screamed, turned quickly, and saw Panzer standing there. His smile quickly faded. "Fooled me again," he said. "I can't get over how much you remind me of my sister." Scout sighed with relief. "I'm wearing the same clothes as earlier." He laughed. "I know. I just keep seeing my sister everywhere I look, and this time I thought I actually had her." "Are you too close?" Scout asked, looking over her shoulder. She doubted she'd catch the costume figure now. "Not as close as I'd like. I still love her, even though she's a pain in the ass." Scout laughed. "I don't have any siblings, but I have a friend who's a pain as well. I think I know how you feel." Panzer nodded, grinning at her. "What would you do with a brother like me?" "I can't even imagine. You're so freaking tall." "My sister's your height. We have the same father, but different moms." "Oh, then I guess I would be happy to have you as a brother." "And I would be happy to have you as a sister. Well, I should go. I have to help Garth with something. It was nice running into you again." "You too. Say hi to Garth for me." They parted, and Scout went back to the elevator, smiling. That Panzer sure was a charmer. Chapter 9. Cody ran into the bathroom and entered a stall. He'd already started undoing his leotard so he could sit on the toilet. He couldn't believe he hadn't thought of this dilemma before leaving his house. If only he had gotten a hotel room. He hated using public restrooms, but he lucked out and found this one empty. He was tempted to lock the door altogether in order to have the whole restroom to himself, but he was already sitting on the toilet, ready for a real steamer. Though he was incredibly skinny, so much so that people thought he was either sick or anorexic, he could really put away large amounts of food. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened. Cody had just been about to push when he heard the creak of hinges. This was the main reason he hated using public bathrooms, making embarrassing noises when others were around. He waited, hoping the person would piss quickly and leave, but instead he saw a pair of blue-booted feet walk up to his stall door and stand there. Someone was just outside, staring at Cody's door. Whoever it was wore yellow spandex and had gigantic calves, bigger than any Cody had ever seen on a real person. The large man continued to stand there. Cody's stomach protested as he continued to wait for the person to leave. A few seconds later, the large man finally turned and walked away. Cody heard the door open and close again. He sighed and went to work. A few minutes later, he wiped, flushed, and left the stall. Almost immediately, he was seized from behind and lifted from the floor. Something wrapped around his arms and chest. His breath was squeezed from his lungs, causing him to grunt. The blood rushed to his face, and his ribs felt like they would collapse any second. Standing in front of him was a small blond boy wearing a yellow spandex suit with red Speedos, cape, gloves, and boots. He stared at Cody with wide, shocked eyes. "What do I do?" the blonde asked. "Whatever you want," a deep voice said behind Cody. "Just avoid his face. I don't want to clean up any blood." Cody realized he was being hugged tightly by a giant. He looked down at the massive arms that held him off the floor. He tried to draw a breath, but found it difficult. The little superhero stepped closer to Cody, studying him. "Try some gut punches," the giant suggested as he leaned back a little, exposing Cody's stomach in the process. Blondie made a fist, reached back, and punched Cody. Cody barely felt it, considering he was still in shock. The giant said, "Punch harder." Blondie did. Cody felt it a little more that time. Garth punched the guy with the purple dreadlocks repeatedly in the stomach. The guy's face was red, turning blue. "Let him go," Garth said. "He can't feel anything." Panzer grinned and opened his arms. The skinny, black leotard guy fell to the floor, gasping. Garth quickly straddled him and grabbed his throat with his left hand while punching him in the stomach with the right. The boy started coughing blood, but Garth didn't care. He kept punching. He didn't see the skinny young man anymore. He saw his own father. He saw Simon Ferguson looking down upon him in the hospital bed and telling him, "You can't even kill yourself right." Garth grabbed his father's throat and squeezed as hard as he could. "I wish you'd gone through with it," Dad managed to say through his closed throat. "Would have done me a favor. You got that craziness from your mom. The world doesn't need people like you, Garth." Garth looked from the red, bloated face to his own wrists, where the scars were still visible under the gloves. Every time he saw those scars, he thought of the worst moments of his life. He cut across the veins instead of up and down. The doctors were able to stitch him up and save his life. His father was right. He had screwed up his own suicide. He'd wanted to do it the same way Mom had. Garth looked from his wrists to his father, but Dad's face was no longer there. A much younger man with purple dreadlocks lay there, his face blue, his tongue sticking out. Garth had subconsciously felt the man's throat collapse in his grip, but he couldn't remember when. How long had he been choking this guy? Garth let go and stood up. He heard a laugh behind him. "Good job," Panzer said. "How did that feel?" Garth took a deep breath to calm his heart. "I want more." Panzer laughed again. "You'll get more, my friend. Much more." "What do we do with him?" "I'll take care of him. Take a break. You just did something significant." "I guess." Panzer had entered a stall, but at those words, he came back out. "No, I guess. You did something special, bud. You killed with your bare hands. I have to be honest, I was worried you wouldn't be able to pull off your plan tomorrow, but now I have no doubt. Look at this guy." He pointed to the body. "I wouldn't have guessed you had that much strength in you." "I imagined my dad." Panzer nodded. "Whatever works." The skinny boy suddenly popped up, his eyes wide. Before Garth could react, Panzer punched the boy in the face. He dropped like a puppet with severed strings, his head striking the toilet seat. His neck bent at an awkward angle. "Christ, that scared me," Panzer said with a laugh. He re-entered the stall and stood on the toilet seat. Garth watched him knock a ceiling tile out of the way. Panzer was so tall, he practically had to bend over to avoid touching the ceiling with his head. He easily placed the dead body up there. "There was blood coming out of his mouth," Garth said nervously. "Don't worry about it. By the time anyone finds him, they'll have bigger problems on their hands." Chapter 10. Scout was happy to be done with work. 15 minutes after the last movie started, she closed her box office window. Her manager closed down the register, took the money in a small black pouch, while Scout took all the coupons she'd received. Together, they went upstairs, where Scout finished her closing sheet. She'd been working at this theater for years and had worked nearly every position available: box office, concession, doorman, usher, and projectionist. She'd even dabbled in chief of staff before deciding it was too much responsibility. She'd been asked during chief training if she'd consider trying out for assistant manager, but she quickly refused the position. She couldn't explain why, but she was happy being a worker bee rather than a queen. She snorted as she thought of that metaphor. "What's so funny?" Billy, the projectionist, asked from the other side of the desk. He was in his 50s, a nice guy who'd been with the theater since its grand opening over a decade ago. "Just thinking of bees," Scout replied as she finished her closing sheet. "How's the convention so far?" Billy asked. "Great. I'm about to head back out there. Guess who I met?" "Who?" "August Dickerson." "From Bad Logic? Damn, that's your favorite show, isn't it?" "Yep. He's so nice. It was kind of sad, though. No one was asking for his autograph. He just sat there, alone at his table, messing with his cell phone." "That is sad. That producer really ruined his career after that show. Do you know the story?" "Billy, who do you think you're talking to? Of course I know the story." He raised his hands. "Pardon me, Queen Scout." Then he grew serious. "Just be careful in Dallas. There's some weird epidemic going on. People are suffering heart attacks. Doctors don't know what's going on. I think there have been 4 cases so far, all young men." Scout nodded as she clocked out at the little machine on the wall outside the office. "I heard about that. I'll be careful. Later, Billy." She raced down the stairs and out the back door, where her car waited. Then she sped on to the service road, toward her apartment. She was grateful to live so close to work. She could easily walk to and from if she wanted. But, of course, she never wanted to. She got her exercise from the tiny fitness center her apartment provided. She passed a nice complex that recited next to her own, turned left at the stop sign, and then another left into her place. She was about to drive to the keypad, but someone was already exiting, so she drove through the open gate and parked in front of her building. Her stomach felt like it had a bowling ball in it. She'd gone straight to work after leaving the convention and hadn't had a chance to use the bathroom. Duke had been right about mixing energy drinks and cashews, apparently. Scout ran up the stairs, unlocked her door, and raced to the bathroom directly to the left. "Hey," Taylor greeted from the couch. "I'm almost ready." "Great," Scout replied as she did her business. "Did you get the beer?" "Yes, and I got pizza. I was delivering my last order, but the guy suddenly didn't want it. He ordered 3, and I just took them with me." "Sweet," Scout said. "What kind are they?" "Sausage and mushroom." Scout flushed, washed her hands, and went back out to the living room. Taylor walked to the kitchen, scratching her short blonde hair as she went. She worked as a pizza delivery girl, having quit her job at a party supply store after moving in with Scout a year ago. They could barely afford this place with their small salaries, but they somehow managed to get by. Scout lay awake many a night, worrying that they would have to search for a cheaper place soon, especially with rumors of the theater closing. The rumors had been circulating for a year now, and it was only a matter of time before they came true. Taylor grabbed 3 pizza boxes from the fridge and rounded the corner to stand in front of Scout. Taylor was a few inches shorter, with hole-ridden jeans and a black t-shirt that read, "I don't know what boys like." She usually wore shorts that showed off her attractive calves, but Scout was grateful she didn't now. Though the two had decided to be just friends, Scout missed the old days when they used to fool around. "Where's me pass?" Taylor asked in an atrocious pirate accent. Scout pulled it from her pocket and handed it to her friend. "Those things are all over the place. I don't get how so many people lose their badges and not realize it." "Maybe they do realize it and just can't find them." Taylor put hers on and admired the lamination. "Are there any hot women?" "Tons," Scout said. "Are they all geeky?" "Some. With my luck, I'll end up with a Princess Leia or something." Taylor headed for the door. "Oh, what's with the sleeping situation at the hotel?" "Shit, you just reminded me. We're rooming with someone named Dante. He's really cool, but there are only 2 beds." "Is Duke bunking with him?" Taylor asked. Scout laughed. "I doubt it." Taylor danced in place. "Are you and Duke bunking?" "Hell no." "Then, can I bunk with you?" Scout's heart fluttered at the question. "If you want to." "I do. It's not like we haven't slept in the same bed before and not fooled around." "Exactly." Scout recalled a situation from last year when she'd attempted to help Taylor get over her temporary breakup with Gina by offering to sleep in the same bed with her. Scout had hated thinking of her friend sleeping alone after years of having someone next to her. Taylor had taken it the wrong way, however. She'd thought Scout was offering to sleep with her, and the two had stopped talking for a while. But that was in the past. So much had happened since then, and there was no point in dwelling in something that no longer mattered. Scout still got angry with Taylor from time to time, though, whenever she randomly thought of that. Taylor hadn't changed much since they first met half a decade ago. She was prone to temper tantrums and wildly shifting moods. Scout and Taylor had stopped being friends 4 times already, all because Scout did or said something that offended Taylor. Taylor wasn't good at discussing her problems with other people, and instead resolved to giving the silent treatment. She and Scout had gotten along pretty well in the last year, though. Nearly being murdered could change anyone's outlook on life. The girls left the apartment and got into Scout's car. It was nearly 11:30. Scout groaned, worrying everyone would be asleep when she returned to the hotel. She wasn't tired and wanted to hang out more. Duke had told her to bring beer, so he must have planned on staying up late. She didn't think she wanted to be friends with people who fell asleep before midnight on a Friday anyway. On the way to the freeway, she and Taylor caught a disturbing sight. A cow had wandered onto the road and had been hit by a truck. There were cops and flares surrounding the scene. Scout drove around them slowly to get a good look. "Poor thing," Taylor said quietly from the passenger seat. She looked back at Scout, who'd nearly stopped the car. "You all right?" "Yeah," she replied. "I don't know. I just got a weird feeling." "About what?" Taylor asked. Scout shook her head. "I don't even know." She suddenly remembered the masked, hooded figure at the convention. She thought of telling Taylor, but she feared worrying her friend over what was possibly nothing. She sped up and drove away from the accident, trying like hell not to look back. One of the things Dante hated about sharing a hotel room with someone was sharing a bathroom. Duke had gone straight to their bathroom after his security shift was over and had been in there for half an hour. Dante couldn't guess at what he was doing in there, so he left the room and headed downstairs to use the community bathroom. Things were winding down on the show floor, but there were still a few costumed stragglers around. Dante almost wished he'd dressed up for the convention. Almost. This was his second convention in as many years. He loved comic books, and he adored the atmosphere of conventions like these. Last year, he'd come with his then boyfriend Chad. Chad was even more of a comic book buff and had been going to conventions for over a decade. He'd finally convinced Dante to give one a try. After last year's visit, Dante cursed himself for not trying this sooner. Unfortunately, he and Chad broke up shortly after, and Dante wasn't sure if he wanted to come this year. Duke had talked him into it, though. Luckily, Chad had moved to another state. After what happened to Duke last summer, Dante couldn't have possibly said no. Dante still couldn't believe his friend had almost been murdered by his best friend Jaren. What was this world coming to? He walked down the windowed ramp and found the bathroom on the left. As soon as he walked in, however, he saw a strange sight. A pair of legs stuck out from one of the middle stalls. Are you okay?" he asked. The man didn't reply. Dante thought he recognized him. He was wearing a black leotard with white bones painted on. Then he remembered the skinny boy he'd taken a picture with earlier that day. "Cody?" "Are you drunk or something?" he asked the boy, walking closer. Cody didn't reply. When Dante finally got a good look at him, he realized why. Chapter 11. Scout helped Taylor carry the beer and pizzas through the lobby. There was some kind of commotion going on a few feet away, near the cafe. A couple of cops were standing there, talking to Dante. He looked distraught as he spoke with the much shorter police. A few other people crowded around. "What's going on there?" Taylor asked. "I don't know," Scout replied. "But I do know that guy talking to the cops." They walked over to the small crowd. Dante noticed Scout and shouted her name, holding out his arms to her. She hugged him. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone's dead." Scout's heart suddenly jolted. "What?" "I found a dead body in the bathroom. It was that cute skinny boy. Remember him? The one with the purple dreadlocks and the leotard?" "Yeah." She was barely listening anymore. All she could think about was the zombie-faced figure. Was there another killer on the loose? "How did he die?" she found herself asking. "Was he murdered?" "We didn't find anything, ma'am," said one of the cops, an older African-American man with a white beard. "The body is gone. Nobody believes me," Dante said. "I know what I saw. It was Cody." Scout nodded as she rubbed Dante's back. He was shivering. She looked over to the cafe and saw Duke sitting in his red staff shirt at one of the round tables, sipping a can of soda. She and Taylor walked over to him while the cops continued speaking with Dante. "Scout, Jesus," Duke said, his eyes wild. "Can you believe this shit? Dante found a dead body in the bathroom." "I know, he told me." She looked over her shoulder to the cops and then leaned over the table, closer to Duke. "I should have told you this earlier. I saw someone." Duke stared at her in silence for 5 seconds before saying, "And?" "He was dressed in a black hoodie and zombie mask." "Like Jaren and Ricky?" "Yes." "What?" Taylor asked with surprise and fear in her voice. She was sitting directly next to Scout and had been admiring the hotel's decor. The cops looked over at the trio in the cafe. Scout gave them a nervous wave. "I don't know what I saw," she told Taylor. "The cops said they didn't find anyone in the bathroom." "You think Dante imagined it?" Duke asked. "I don't know. Maybe he just saw Cody passed out on the floor." "You should tell the cops what you saw, Scout," Duke said. "Just in case." She nodded. "Okay." The three got up from the table and started walking toward the cops when an elevator opened down the hall. Scout turned and saw Panzer standing by the elevators, leaning against the wall. He was out of his blue and yellow superhero costume and was wearing a white t-shirt and tan shorts. Both looked close to bursting at the seams. Garth wasn't around. "What's going on?" Panzer asked as he walked up to Scout. "Thank you," the white-bearded cop said to Dante before he and his partner left the lobby. Scout said distractedly as she watched them leave. Then she turned back to Panzer. "Dante saw a dead body in one of the bathrooms." "Oh, my God," Panzer replied, his eyes wide. "Are you serious?" "No one believes me," Dante said quietly. "He was lying next to a toilet. His neck looked like it was broken." Panzer grabbed him and hugged him to his chest. "I'm so sorry. That must have been awful." Scout and Taylor locked eyes. Taylor grinned. "Do you want to come up to my room? Maybe have a drink with me?" Panzer asked him. "It might take your mind off things." "I don't know," Dante replied, looking to his friends. "It's okay," Duke said. "We don't mind." "Are you guys leaving?" Dante asked, sounding a bit worried. "No, not at all," Scout said. "We'll stay. We'll just be in our room. We won't leave you." "Okay." Panzer took Dante's hand and led him back to the elevator. "Who the hell was that?" Taylor asked. "Panzer," Duke whispered. "We met him earlier." "Oh yeah, Scout told me about him on the way here." Scout shot her a look, remembering the conversation they'd had earlier about Duke's man-crush. "He is impossibly buff," Taylor added. "I could look like that too if I took steroids," Duke said. "So, we're not leaving?" Scout asked, not hating the idea exactly. She couldn't believe it, but she actually wanted to stay. If Cody was murdered, she wanted to find out who did it. It wasn't like she hadn't already caught a killer before. She could do it again. Chapter 12. Scout took Taylor up to the room, where Taylor decided to take a shower. Scout told her she and Duke were going downstairs for something, and that they should be back in half an hour. Then they would drink beer and eat pizza. What Scout didn't tell Taylor was what she and Duke planned to do downstairs. They went down to the ground floor, where Dante had found the body. Scout looked around to make sure no one saw her. Then she opened the door and looked in. Duke started to follow, but she stopped him. "You stay out here and make sure no one comes in," she told him. "Why would anyone go in?" "I'm going in," she replied. "Fine, I see your point. Why can't I go in and you be lookout?" "Because you're part of the staff. It's more natural for you to stand outside a potential crime scene than me. People might actually listen to you." "But no one believes a crime was actually—" Duke suddenly perked up, puffing out his chest. "You really think people will take me seriously?" "Yes." She stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. She walked up to a stall and looked inside. The toilet seat had a smudge of blood on it. Scout grew nauseated, but didn't look away. Dante had said Cody's neck looked broken as he lay next to this toilet. Maybe he fell and accidentally killed himself. Scout very much wanted to believe that. But if Cody had died here, where was his body? Duke stood in front of the bathroom door with his arms crossed, looking around nervously, hoping no one approached. He couldn't believe this shit was happening again. After the ordeal with Jaren and Ricky last year, he never imagined he'd find himself in a similar situation ever again. He felt like he was in a bad sequel. A young man walked up to him, trying to get inside the bathroom. "Whoa!" Duke yelled. "This bathroom is closed." "I really have to piss," the boy replied. "Use the one in your room, or, like, the other dozen bathrooms in this hotel." "Come on, man. I'm already here and I can't hold it anymore." Duke shook his head. "Have some respect. Someone probably died in here. Do you really want to use a bathroom that might have a ghost in it?" The kid scrunched up his face. "Why would a bathroom have a goat in it?" Duke did a double take. "No, damn it. I said ghost. Clean your fucking ears." Scout searched every stall, as well as the trash can under the paper towel dispenser. She didn't find anything odd, except a few pieces of what looked like ceiling tile in the trash. She looked up and found a broken tile directly above the curious stall. For some reason, she found that odd. She went back to the stall and studied it again. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She gave a squeak of fright and turned. It was only Duke. "What the hell, girl?" "Jesus, you scared me. And don't call me that, because you can't pull it off like Dante. Why aren't you outside?" "I wanted to see what was taking you so goddamn long. I already had to fight off some little deaf bastard." Scout pointed to the ceiling. "Look at that." He did. "A broken ceiling tile? So what?" She looked at the floor, behind the toilet. She almost missed the triangle-shaped piece of tile there. It was the size of a business card, and was the same color as the floor. "I have a theory," she said. "Do tell, Shirley Temple." Scout looked at him, confused. Duke closed his eyes and sighed. I meant Nancy Drew. She shook her head, smiling. I think Cody fell from the ceiling. What makes you think that? The broken tile in the trash, and a piece of tile behind the toilet. They were both inside the small stall, and he leaned at an awkward angle to look behind the toilet. He then looked up at the ceiling again. I'm sure the cops noticed that too and looked up there, he said. I know. I think someone killed Cody and hid his body in the ceiling. Then, when the body fell down and Dante found it, that person came in and somehow got rid of it. Duke stood silently for a moment, processing this. Finally, he said, Why the hell would anyone do something that ridiculous? Why else? To hide the fact Cody was ever up there in the first place. Whoever killed him probably doesn't want anyone to know there was a murder. Taylor was pulling a few slices of pizza from one of the boxes when Scout and Duke got back to the room. She sat in one of the chairs by the window, looking down at something. Everything okay? She asked the duo. Scout looked at Duke, not knowing how to answer. Finally, she said, Yeah, fine. Duke went straight for the pizza and beer on the table in front of the window and looked out at whatever had caught Taylor's attention. Holy shit, he said, nearly choking on the beer. Damn! Scout walked up to the window as well and looked down. There were 2 people in the pool, a blonde guy and a girl with blue hair. They were making out. Some guys get all the luck, Duke said as he walked away, eating the pizza noisily. I like her hair, Taylor said absently as she watched. Scout liked it too. It was dark blue, darker than the pool water. Scout smiled at Taylor as she grabbed a slice and a beer. So, Scout said, what now? We can watch porn, Duke suggested. Pass, Taylor and Scout said together. I also brought a zombie board game that's pretty awesome. Well, what are you waiting for? Taylor said with a laugh. Whip it out, boy. Chapter 13. Panzer unlocked his hotel door and held it open for Dante. Dante entered the room and looked around. The room smelled heavily of a musky cologne. Dante usually hated such colognes, but the big man made it work. Make yourself comfortable, Panzer said as he waved toward the closest bed. Dante sat down at the end and watched Panzer close the door and then head for a cooler in the corner of the room. He pulled out 2 beers and brought one back to Dante. Panzer sat next to him, his weight causing the bed to dip dramatically. Dante fell toward the giant and laughed as he pushed himself away. Sorry, Dante said. No need to apologize. What part of California are you from? Los Angeles. Do you meet a lot of movie stars? Dante smiled. Yeah, all the time. Dante gasped. Really? Panzer laughed. I'm just messing with you, bud. I haven't met any, though you do remind me of one. Everyone thinks I'm Wesley Snipes for some reason. You do kinda look like him. When he was in that movie, what's it called? Panzer scratched his chin. Demolition Man, Dante supplied. Panzer snapped his fingers. That's it. Dante nodded and looked around the room again. There was a little backpack on the floor by the window and cooler. You pack light, I take it? I've always been a man of few possessions. I'm the complete opposite. I brought several bags with me this weekend. Why? I don't know. I just like to be prepared. For what? For anything, man. Panzer looked directly into Dante's eyes. I'm sorry about what you saw tonight. Dante looked away. Yeah, that was pretty harsh. Do you want to talk about it? Dante looked at him again. Why would I want to do that? I don't know. Sometimes when people experience a traumatic event, it helps to talk about it. It makes them feel better. Sometimes. I just want to forget all about it. Dante took a big gulp of beer this time. No one believes me anyway. I understand, Panzer said as he put a hand on Dante's shoulder and pulled him close. Dante felt like he was lying against a rock, but he didn't mind. He rested his head against the big man's chest, sniffing at the cologne. Do you think it was an accident? Panzer suddenly asked after a long moment of comfortable silence. His voice rumbled from his chest. Was what an accident? Dante asked. What happened to the guy? I know you don't want to talk about it, but I can't help but wonder what happened to him. Dante felt Panzer's arm tighten around his neck. He closed his eyes and said, With that skinny twink, he may have had a few too many drinks and fallen. He looked like he broke his neck on the toilet. Panzer's arm loosened. That's probably it. You don't think he was murdered? Suddenly, the hotel door opened, startling Dante. The blonde boy, Garth, ran in and started rambling on about something. He stopped when he noticed Dante on the bed. Oh, Garth said. I didn't know you had company. It's all right, Dante said, standing up. I should be getting back to my room. Are you sure? Panzer asked him. Dante thought he heard a little sadness in his voice. He smiled. Yeah, but you guys are welcome to hang out with us later if you want. We have pizza and beer and video games, if I know Duke. He told them his room number, and then left. Chapter 14. What the fuck? Garth yelled after the black guy left. You're shacking up with a stranger after what just happened? Panzer, who had his hand on the closed hotel door, turned back to the little man. What business is it of yours? The police almost found the body, that's what. I had a shit time getting it back into the ceiling. We have to get it out of here before it's found. Panzer took a big step toward him. I'll take care of the body. Even if it is found, you were wearing gloves, so there won't be any fingerprints. For all anyone would know, he fell and broke his neck on the toilet. That's what Dante thinks. Who the fuck is Dante? The guy who just left. You really should pay more attention to the things that go on around you, associate. My name is Garth. Panzer stared at him with wide eyes. Look at you. Kill one person and suddenly you're the lord of the manor. Garth took a deep breath and willed himself to calm down. I didn't kill him. We should have set off the bomb today. I don't feel good about this anymore. Relax. Panzer placed his hand on the little guy's shoulders. We'll do it at the panel. It'll be the perfect time to get her. They'll be in that ballroom above the Uriah wing. At least 100 people will watch her blow up. Garth nodded. That sounds good. We'll place the bomb under the table and blow it, far from here, Panzer added. Everything will work out. Garth looked at the giant warily. You really did your research, didn't you? I did it for you, bud. For some reason, Garth didn't believe that. Panzer headed for the door again. Where are you going? Garth asked. To Dante's room. Why? Panzer took a deep breath before replying. Because I want to. Are you attracted to him or something? Are you jealous? Garth suddenly saw red. Fuck you! Panzer shook his head and pushed Garth lightly against the chest. Well, lightly for Panzer, but Garth felt like he'd been hit with a sledgehammer. He flew backward and landed on his ass. Panzer stood there for a moment, chuckled, and then headed for the door again. Garth couldn't stop himself. He got to his feet and jumped on Panzer's back. He wrapped his fingers around the giant's throat and squeezed as hard as he could. Panzer actually let out a grunt of surprise. Then he started flailing his arms around, trying to grab Garth. Garth felt his fingers digging into Panzer's neck, almost as if it were dough. Panzer started to freak out, running around the room and bumping into walls. After a few seconds, he dropped to his knees, gasping. Then he fell on his back. Garth had the air crushed out of him as he let go of Panzer. The giant slowly rolled over and looked at Garth with fear in his eyes. "How the hell did you do that?" Garth didn't know what to say. "I was really mad," he managed. Panzer's face was a slowly fading red as he massaged his neck. "Jesus, you're stronger than you look." He got to his feet and helped Garth up. "Come on, let's just have one beer with Dante and his friends. Then I'll take care of the body." Chapter 15. "A group of zombies has you cornered, and you have no weapons," Duke reminded Taylor. She grabbed a pair of dice and rolled. She read the numbers and moved her game piece through the little game board town the appropriate number of spaces. She then read the directions written in the space. "I slipped past the zombies without notice." "Lucky," Scout said as she rolled the dice. Her character was on the other side of the board/town. "What's the point of this game again?" Taylor asked, taking a bite of pizza. "The goal of the game is to reach the safe haven in the center," Scout said. "Whoever gets there first wins." She moved her character several spaces and read, "Fuck me sideways. A zombie dog just bit my leg." Duke and Taylor laughed. "You better hope you get to the haven soon," Duke said sympathetically. "That's where the cure is." Scout rolled her eyes and handed him the dice. "I wonder how Dante's doing." "Can you imagine?" Duke asked, scoffing. "What's that supposed to mean?" Taylor asked. "Nothing. Just, if they're, "No, I don't know." Duke's face turned red. "I just don't get the logistics of that." Taylor laughed, letting him off the hook. "Panzer is impossibly huge." "I couldn't imagine being that buff," Scout added. "It must be tiring, getting around. He was breathing kinda heavy when I first met him." "The human body isn't meant to handle that kind of mass on a daily basis," Duke chimed in, ever the knowledgeable one. "How would you know?" Taylor asked. He sighed. "I wouldn't." They all laughed. Suddenly, the hotel door opened, and in walked Dante. The trio ceased laughing immediately. Dante stared at them. "What did I miss?" he asked. "Nothing," Duke said. "How was your date?" "It wasn't a date. He was just being nice to me. After what I saw." Taylor looked at Scout and whispered, "Are you sure it's not happening again?" Scout shook her head. Truthfully, she still had no idea. She didn't want to scare Taylor. After seeing the dead cow on the way to the hotel, something in the back of her mind was telling her to flee, that something terrible was going to happen soon. Dante grabbed a beer and a slice of pizza and sat at the table to watch the others play. Eventually, Taylor reached the haven first, leaving Scout and Duke to die in the zombie-infested streets. "Girl, you wrong," Dante told Taylor. How so? You left your friends out there like that. He smiled kindly. I didn't make the rules, honey. Dante laughed and went to the window. Damn, that girl is going to town on that guy. Duke laughed. I said the same thing earlier. They're still in the pool? Scout looked down and saw the blue-haired girl doing more than just making out with the guy now. Her head was beneath the water's surface. Someone knocked on the door. Dante answered. Panzer? He said with surprise. Scout turned to see the giant standing in the doorway. He smiled and waved at her. She waved back. Come in, Dante said, backing up. Panzer ducked and entered the room, followed by little Garth. The small guy grinned shyly. Taylor leaned toward Scout and whispered, Who's the little one? Garth. We met him too. He seems a little high-strung, but he's harmless. He's adorable, Taylor said. Are you straight all of a sudden? Scout asked. If I were, I'd tear him up. I just want to put him in my pocket. He's pretty, like a girl. With his shoulder-length blonde hair and soft face, he did appear a tad feminine. Scout stifled a laugh as the newcomers grabbed beers and pizza. With Panzer there, the room seemed a lot smaller. He stood by the window, in the corner, to allow people more space. Panzer, Scout said. This is my friend Taylor. Taylor, this is Panzer. I don't think you two officially met earlier. They shook hands as his gaze wandered out the window. That's a hell of a grip, Taylor said with a grimace on her face. Panzer didn't seem to notice. He was looking down, toward the pool. Suddenly, he looked at Taylor, then down at their hands, and then released her. I'm so sorry. I have to go. Something to take care of. He suddenly left the room, surprisingly fast for a man his size. Everyone stared after him. What was that about? Duke asked. Garth didn't go after his friend, though. He simply shrugged and studied the board game. What's this? Dante headed for the door. I'll check on him. He sounded disgusted with Garth as he walked out the door, but Scout may have imagined it. Garth didn't seem to hear Dante's words. Duke explained the rules of the game to Garth as Scout looked down at the pool again. The guy and girl were still going at it, with the girl kissing the guy again. The girl suddenly looked up at Scout, and Scout backed away quickly. The last thing she wanted was to be considered a voyeur. And damn if that girl didn't look a lot like Scout. Chapter 16. Dante ran down the hall, looking for Panzer. He had no idea where to look, and the big man was faster than Dante would have imagined. He went to Panzer's room first, knocked, and waited for a few seconds before moving on. Then he headed downstairs. Making his way to the ground floor, he headed for the pool area. It was after 1 a.m., and nearly the entire hotel seemed to be asleep. He passed a few costumed people along the way, but for the most part, the convention was dead. The Oriya wing had closed a few hours ago and wouldn't open again until 11 in the morning. Dante walked into the pool area and found it empty. He started back toward the elevators when he saw Panzer walk into the Rigelia wing, holding a large suitcase. The giant was inside before Dante could call him. Why did Panzer go into the construction site? Dante opened the door and stepped in. The room looked a lot like the wing across the hall, only a lot messier and with a lower ceiling. The large area was dimly lit with a few lamps, and partitions were set up throughout. "Sorry it had to be like this, Cody," he heard Panzer say. Dante rounded one of the partitions and saw something that didn't make sense to him. Panzer opened the suitcase and dumped something into a pit. Whatever it was seemed fairly large. Panzer, breathing heavily, looked around the area. His gaze settled on Dante and his eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Dante, you weren't supposed to see this." Dante, still stunned by what he just saw, turned and ran the other way. He heard Panzer's heavy steps right behind him. Dante screamed as he tried to get through the maze of construction equipment and partitions. He turned right and came to a dead end. When he spun around, he ran into the waiting arms of a giant. "Why didn't you go after your friend?" Taylor asked Garth. He shrugged. "I'm sure he just had an errand to run. He'll probably be back soon." "Aren't you curious about why he stormed out?" "No." Scout grinned at the two across the table as they played another round of dead zombies. She always found it fun to watch her friends mingle. Granted, she'd only met Garth today and didn't consider him a friend yet, but Taylor seemed to like talking to him. Garth rolled the dice and made his move. He was in the lead and was most likely going to reach the haven first. As she watched him make his move, Scout wondered what had happened to Panzer. She thought of the blue-haired girl in the pool. She wouldn't have been surprised if that had been Panzer's sister. Or maybe the giant simply thought so as well. Maybe it was the late hour or the fact she'd been up since 6 a.m., but Scout felt a little delirious. Maybe Cody had just fallen and Dante thought he was dead. Maybe the figure she saw at the bottom of the escalator and in the elevator was just some random cosplayer who thought it would be cool to dress like the killer from last summer's #1 local news story. It wasn't bad taste, but it wasn't against the law. Besides, if there was another killer on the loose, he or she would have been more obvious. That's how it usually worked out in the movies. Scout thought of the sequel to her favorite horror movie, and how it took place on a college campus. The killers made their intentions very plain to everyone, including the heroine. Scout had been chased around a few times, and couldn't help but think of herself as the heroine of last summer's drama. It was her best friend, after all, who turned out to be the killer. Unless this new killer didn't want to draw attention before the weekend was over. Maybe he or she had something planned. "Your turn," a voice said, breaking up her thoughts. She looked ahead. "What?" "I said it's your turn," Taylor repeated. "What are you thinking about over there?" "Nothing." Scout rolled the dice and moved her character. She was the second closest to the haven and could possibly beat Garth if she was lucky. "So," Duke said to Garth, "is your buddy Panzer, like, gay or something?" Garth shrugged. "I don't know what he is. He doesn't like labels." "Is he into guys?" "Why?" Garth asked, raising an eyebrow. "Would you like me to hook you up?" Scout guffawed. Duke shot her a look that shut her up quickly. "I was just wondering. He and Dante seemed to hit it off, but I couldn't tell if they were flirting or not." "Not all gay people want to hook up with each other," Taylor said, a little heat in her voice. "Well, not you and Scout, that's for sure," Duke muttered. "Excuse me?" Taylor crossed her arms. "I mean, like, how you two are just friends?" She uncrossed her arms. "Oh, exactly. Scout and I are just friends. It's possible Panzer and Dante are just kindred spirits or something. They're both taller than just about anybody at this convention." Except August Dickerson, Scout added. He seems to be the same height. There was a long, awkward silence as the four young people sat at the table, drinking beer. And then Duke said, "But before that—" "Before that what?" Taylor asked quickly. "Well, do you deny you and Scout hooked up before deciding to be friends?" Scout didn't know what to say. She and Garth looked back and forth between Taylor and Duke. "I don't see how that's any of your business," Taylor said slowly. "But I met Scout right after breaking up with someone I loved. I was a little vulnerable." "So Scout was your rebound?" Taylor stared at him for a few tense seconds. Duke looked at Scout. "Did you know you were a rebound at the time?" Scout was about to shake her head, but decided to say nothing at all. Duke looked at Taylor again. "Don't you think that was a little shitty? I remember when Scout met you. She really liked you and thought you two were going somewhere. And then you pulled that shit." "So, all gay people are deceitful sex fiends?" Taylor asked. "No," Duke replied. "Just you." Taylor got up and headed for the hotel door. Scout started to stand, but Taylor stopped her. Then she left the room. Scout sat back down. "I think I should talk to her," Garth said, surprising Scout. "She clearly has an issue with you two. I think she just needs an impartial ear to listen." He stood and walked out the door. "Wow," Duke said admiringly. "He's very astute." Scout was fuming. "Shut up before I knock those hipster glasses off your face." "Bitch, these are prescription." Scout laughed. She couldn't help it. Chapter 17. Taylor was walking down the hall when she heard heavy footsteps behind her. She expected Scout and was about to turn around and yell when she heard an unexpected voice. "Wait up!" She stopped and turned. That skinny boy, Garth, was jogging up to her. He smiled and said, "Can I walk with you?" "I'd rather be alone." "No, you wouldn't. Trust me. You need to vent, and I'm a good listener." She stared at him. He had a cute sideways grin on his face. "I guess you're right." "I know a cool place where we can be alone. Do you trust me?" "I just met you." "I won't hurt you." His smile grew. "All right," Taylor said. She followed him down to the show floor and up an escalator. There was a large, closed-off area that reminded her of the auditorium in her high school. There were several large closed doors and a sign advertising the panel that would occur later in the day. "I'll be right back," Garth said, and then backed away. Then he ran toward the wall next to the doors and disappeared into the ceiling. Taylor grinned at the stunt. After a few seconds, one of the doors popped open. Garth reached out and took Taylor's hand, pulling her inside. The dimly lit ballroom was smaller than Taylor thought it would be. There was a small stage at the far end, with a few rows of tables lined up with black blankets covering them. Between the intruders and the stage was nothing but open space. Taylor assumed this space would be filled with folding chairs soon. "Impressive stunt work," Taylor said, walking slowly toward the stage. "Thanks." Garth followed, his hands in his pockets. "Do you like Bad Logic?" she asked him, remembering the sign outside. "I used to watch it with my mom." "Scout loves that show." Taylor rubbed her wrists nervously, trying to hide the action from the other. He noticed anyway. "I saw the scars," he said. She spun around to look at him. "And just when I thought I was hiding them well." He smiled, rolled up his sleeves, and showed his wrists. He had similar white scars. "After all these years, I haven't quite mastered the art of hiding mine either. I saw yours when we were playing the zombie game." Taylor lightly touched his scars. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" "I don't mind, as long as you don't mind when I ask you in return." Taylor smiled. "I won't mind." Garth walked up to the stage and sat down on it. Taylor joined him as they sat in front of the tables. "I know I'm not the only person who had a terrible childhood," he began. "I was lucky to have an escape from my problems when I was a kid. Can you guess what that was?" "Comic books?" He laughed, and Taylor thought it was one of the nicest laughs she'd ever heard. "That's right," he continued. "I read them all the time when my parents fought. I used to trace the characters on the pages. I got so good that I was able to draw characters without tracing. I guess that tells you how much my parents fought." "I'm sorry," Taylor said, rubbing his back. He tensed up at first, and then relaxed after a few seconds. "Things got worse between my dad and me after my mom died. She killed herself when I was 8. He stopped, as if his throat had closed. Finally, he said, "He had the audacity to blame me for her death." Taylor didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "One day, Dad found my drawings while I was at school and destroyed them. I came home and saw them shredded all over my room. He even destroyed all my comic books." "That must have been traumatizing." "It definitely was. So traumatizing that I slit my wrists later that day." Taylor felt like she'd been punched in the chest. Even though she'd known that was coming, Garth had said it so casually that it freaked her out. "I honestly tried to kill myself," he went on. "Maybe even tried to leave Dad and join Mom. I even changed my last name from Ferguson to Hauser to honor her. But I didn't slit my wrists right, and I ended up in the hospital before I could bleed to death." "You shouldn't think like that," Taylor said. "I mean, I kinda know what you've been through. More so than anyone else, at least. You have to find better ways to live your life. Get rid of the people who make your life hell." "Oh, I did," he said quietly. "I mean, Dad died shortly after my attempt. He had a heart attack, but I like to think it happened because I kept wishing he would die. I know I don't have that power, but, you know." "Yeah, I know." She nudged his shoulder. "I used to wish my mom would." She trailed off. She was about to say die, but it would have been incredibly inappropriate, considering what he'd just told her about his own mom. "What about Scout?" he suddenly asked, clearly changing the subject. She snapped to attention. "What?" "You keep pushing her away, don't you?" "Oh, yeah, I guess." "Is she toxic?" Taylor sighed. "No, she's one of the bravest girls I've ever met. She saved my life." "Then why aren't you two together?" "I honestly don't know. We just bring out the worst in each other sometimes." Garth snorted. "That's silly. If you love her, you should be with her." "You think so?" "I know so." They sat silently in the ballroom for a moment. Then Garth said, "Can I tell you something really personal?" "Sure." "I've never kissed a girl before." "Are you serious?" He nodded. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, I've never kissed a boy before." He laughed. "Well, you have the perfect excuse. I don't. Girls just don't like me." "I like you." They stared at each other for a moment. "Tell you what," she said. "Let's cross these off our bucket lists. I'll kiss you, and you kiss me." Garth's eyes grew wide. "Really?" Taylor laughed and nodded. "Yes, just for fun, though. I'm still gay." "I understand." She placed her hand on his shoulder. After a moment, she then grabbed one of his hands and placed it on her shoulder. The poor boy was trembling. She leaned close to him and smelled beer on his breath. For some reason, she liked that. Garth and Taylor grew closer until their lips touched. His breathing sped up. Taylor was relieved he didn't try to stick his tongue in her mouth. They simply touched lips for 10 seconds. Then they parted. "How was that?" she asked. "Super." Duke awoke in the chair by the air conditioner, moody techno music playing from somewhere. The room was dark and freezing, and he started coughing. Something had awoken him. He saw someone holding the room's door open. Scout. Someone else was coming in. Taylor. About time she came back. The two went to their bed, closest to the bathroom. Duke wondered why he hadn't taken Dante's bed. It wasn't like the boy was sleeping there now. He was probably going to stay with Panzer tonight. Duke knew he should just take the bed. The chair was supremely uncomfortable. However, he knew if Dante returned, he would have no problem jumping into bed with him. Of course, he and Duke wouldn't do anything, but Duke couldn't imagine sleeping in the same bed with a gay guy. So he stayed in his chair, letting the sound of the air conditioner lull him back to a half sleep. Chapter 18. Dante awoke in a bathroom. In fact, he was in a tub. Whose tub? And how did he get here? He tried to move, but found he couldn't. Then he heard voices outside the bathroom. "That was a stupid thing you did," said a muffled voice. "I had to hide the body somewhere." That was Panzer, no doubt about it. He was closer to the door. Who was that other voice? "Where's the body?" the other guy asked. "I dropped it in a pit in the construction site and covered it with cement. No one will find it." "They better not. Today is too important. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," Panzer said. "Just make sure I get the rest of my money." "You're killing too many people," the other guy said. "You haven't even been in Dallas that long." "Impressive, huh? 5 deaths so far. I'm a beast." Dante couldn't believe what he was hearing. "By the time anyone figures out what went on," Panzer continued, "the hotel will be in ruins." "Ruins?" Dante groaned in fear. "What was that?" the other guy asked suddenly. "Nothing," Panzer said. "Is there someone in there?" "Yes, but I'll take care of it." "You better. And you make sure Garth does his part." Dante held his breath. He heard the room's door open and close. A second later, the bathroom door opened and Panzer walked in. His hulking frame loomed over the tub. "Hey there," Panzer said quietly as he sat on the lip of the tub. "Sorry about earlier. You walked in on me taking care of business. I was going to take care of you too, but changed my mind. Your head probably hurts from where I butted it. Sorry." Dante suddenly realized his head did hurt. He tried to talk, but something prevented it. Tape? If I take this off, do you promise not to scream? Dante nodded. Panzer pulled the tape off. Why are you doing this? Dante asked immediately. It's not me, it's Garth. He has a score to settle. With who? It's with the producer of that silly sci-fi show. Garth blames her for his mom's suicide. So he's going to blow up the hotel? Panzer raised his eyebrows. How long have you been awake? Long enough. Is it true, Maine? Yes, it's true. He worked so hard on that bomb. Otherwise, I would have just broken the woman's heart. What are you talking about? Dante asked. I can make people's hearts explode. It took me years to perfect it. It's pretty effective. Better than stabbing or shooting somebody anyway. Are you going to kill me? Dante asked. For a moment, Panzer stared at him silently. Then he said, No, but you will die in the explosion. The ballroom is directly beneath us. Garth designed the bomb a certain way, but I tampered with it. The explosion will be a lot more devastating than he planned. According to Garth, at least the 3 floors above the ballroom will be completely destroyed. Don't do this, Panzer. Please. It's not up to me. It's up to him. He replaced the tape on Dante's mouth and then left the bathroom. Scout knew Duke wasn't asleep in his chair by the window, but she didn't care. She and Taylor weren't doing anything anyway. Definitely not anything he'd be interested in seeing. He constantly joked about wanting to see Scout and Taylor make out in front of him, but they never obliged. Besides, she and Taylor were just friends. At least, that's what Scout always told herself. How are you doing? She asked Taylor. Fine now. Sorry I stormed out like that. They grew silent once again. The quiet, moody techno played on from Scout's cell phone, and she basked in the atmosphere. She looked over to the window and listened to the air conditioner hum. She couldn't imagine being anywhere else right now. Taylor suddenly wrapped an arm around Scout's torso. Is this okay? Taylor asked. Yeah. Duke snorted from his corner. Yep, definitely awake, but he wouldn't be for long. Air conditioners always put him to sleep. Scout's attention was drawn to the empty bed that separated them. Was Dante still with Panzer? That Garth guy is really interesting, Taylor said. Really? Scout asked. How so? He snuck us into the ballroom. How did he do that? The ceiling, Taylor said with a quiet laugh. Scout's attention was piqued. The ceiling? Yeah, he crawled through the ceiling and unlocked the door from the inside. It was pretty neat in there. I guess they're having something important later today. Yeah, said Scout. An announcement from the producer of Bad Logic. She was still thinking about what Taylor had told her about the ceiling. Garth actually asked me why we aren't together. Scout snapped back to attention. Say what? She asked skeptically. He said we're cute together. Do you think we're cute together? Scout asked. Scout felt her nod against her shoulder. Maybe, but I'm always being such a bitch to you. No, you're not, Scout said. Don't bullshit a bullshitter, Scout. She sighed. All right. Yeah, you can be a super bitch sometimes. Super bitch! They laughed quietly. Even Duke made a noise. What I mean, Scout continued, is that you have your moments. But I kept coming back, didn't I? You drive me crazy, but in a good way. Does that make sense? Some. They went quiet again. Duke started snoring softly from his chair as the techno continued. The music was so soft and hypnotizing, making Scout feel better than she had in a long time. This was, quite possibly, the best weekend she'd had in years. She got to meet August Dickerson, of all people. And now she lay with Taylor, and they were discussing a possible relationship. Scout had wanted this for years, ever since they first met. I would never leave you behind, Taylor suddenly said. What? Like in that zombie game. I made it to the Haven and left you and Duke behind. That was just a game. I know, but still, I would never do that. You know that, right? Of course I know that, Scout said. You saved Duke and me last summer when you brought the cops. Ricky was seconds away from killing me. You're my hero, girl. Taylor chuckled into Scout's shoulder. Then she kissed Scout on the lips. Chapter 19. Cassandra Fairchild took off her heels with a sigh and lay on her hotel bed. I know, Douglas, she said into her cell phone. This convention is important, though. I need to start building interest in the new project, or I might as well call it quits altogether. Everyone here hates me as it is. She listened to her husband rant for a minute before telling him she was tired and was going to bed. She hung up and went to the bathroom sink to wash off her makeup. A few minutes later, someone knocked on her door. She walked up to it and looked through the peephole. What the hell? She whispered. Then she opened the door. Hello, Cassandra, August Dickerson said, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. August, what are you doing here? May I come in? It's really late, she replied, though she had to force herself to look up into his eyes. He wore a button-down shirt that was not buttoned at the top. She could see his attractive chest muscles, with little puffs of gray hair on them. What can I do for you? Oh, come now. We go back a long time. We haven't seen each other since the magazine interview. Just 1 glass? He held up the champagne. She sighed again. Oh, all right. Come in. She backed away to allow him in. He set the glasses on a table and pulled the cork out. The bottle had been opened before. August poured them both a glass and then handed one to Cassandra. Why are you really here? She asked him. Well, I have to admit that, after the interview, all these feelings that lay dormant for a long time suddenly sprang back up. What feelings? Feelings about you. She laughed. Hatred? Disgust? He smiled and stepped closer. Quite the opposite. Then he kissed her. She backed away. What do you think you're doing? Something I've wanted to do for a long time. He kissed her again. This time, she kissed him back. After their passionate lovemaking was done, they lay in bed together. Cassandra still couldn't believe what had just happened. She lay in August's arms as he breathed on her neck. What will I tell my husband? She asked with a laugh. You're still married to that old beast? August asked. That beast has been good to me for 30 years. She grew serious. I have to say I'm surprised you don't hate me after what happened to you. He didn't answer for a while. Then he said, I was mad at first, but only because I couldn't work with you anymore. Come on, August. I know how much of a horn dog you were when we were filming, with all those prostitutes. That can't be the only reason. What about your career? He snorted. I agree that my career hasn't been what I hoped it would be. But that's my fault, not yours. Tonight has been a dream. He kissed her again. I must admit I've enjoyed it too, she said. After a few minutes of blissful silence, August asked, What are you working on now? I can't tell you. It's a secret. I won't tell anyone, I promise. I believe you, but I still can't tell. I'm under contract. Even after all that lovin', you're not going to tell me? She looked at him. Did you really think sex would loosen my tongue? Well, he said with a chuckle, your tongue was pretty loose earlier. She swatted his shoulder. Don't be crass. At least tell me this. Is there a place for me in this secret project? Oh, August. I'm sorry, but there really isn't. I see. He got up and started to dress again. Cassandra admired his tall, lean physique. He looked like a man half his age. Where are you going? She asked. I don't feel welcome here anymore. He grabbed the champagne bottle, along with the glasses. I'll see myself out. Chapter 20. Scout started her Saturday early. When she woke, Duke was already up and playing a video game with his headphones on. She was startled by the image at first, because Jaren used to do the same thing, with the same brand of headphones. Anything that reminded Scout of him was something she could do without. She and Taylor then got dressed in their bathing suits and headed down to the pool. It was another hot day, and though Scout dreaded driving home in this weather, she decided she would focus on that later and enjoy herself now. The water felt great against her skin, and she felt relaxed. That was until she saw August Dickerson. She'd been soaking up the sun in a beach chair when he sat down next to her and stuck his nose in an e-reader. He didn't seem to recognize her, but she couldn't stop staring at him. The real-life Dr. Mason Campbell from Bad Logic was sitting next to her. Scout couldn't catch her breath. Her heart raced. He slowly looked up at her from the corners of his eyes. Hi there, he said nervously. Hi. Sorry for staring. We met yesterday? He snapped his fingers. Wait, it'll come to me. Scout Gallery? That's exactly right. She wasn't about to correct him about her last name. It was great meeting you. I've been a fan of yours for so long. I wasn't expecting to see you among us mortals. He laughed. I'm very much mortal, too, you know. I actually envy real celebrities. They can't just go anywhere they want without being hounded. That's the life I want. Unfortunately, I can lounge by a pool, and no one will bat an eyelash. Well, except you. Scout giggled in a way she'd never giggled before. She stopped immediately and felt her face heat up. That was an unusual laugh, August said. I used to know someone who laughed like that. Really? Scout rested her chin on a fist and studied the man. He nodded. A long time ago. Before you were born, I'm sure. In fact, I was still working on the show back then. She was quite a woman. Women are pretty hot, Scout said before she could stop herself. August stared at her with a raised eyebrow. I, like the ladies, Scout explained. Nothing wrong with that, August said with a laugh. I like them too. Are your parents okay with your lifestyle? Scout recoiled at the question. She hadn't expected it. My adoptive mom is okay with it. You were adopted? Scout nodded. When I was a baby. I don't know my birth parents. Do you ever want to meet them? Not really. If they don't want me, I don't want them. Oh, I'm sure there's more to the story than you know. August offered a kind smile. Do you have any kids? Scout asked. She'd looked him up online several times over the years, but his family history was private. She was never able to find much. I have a few, he said. I don't get to see them as often as I'd like. Are they grown up with families of their own? No, they're just scattered about, and it's difficult getting them together. Scout was fascinated. She'd learned more about one of her favorite actors in 24 hours than she had in a decade. I hear Cassandra Fairchild is making some kind of announcement, Scout told him. Do you know what it's about? What do you think it's about, Scout? Maybe they're rebooting Bad Logic, she asked hopefully. Or turning it into a movie. I can't help but find it too coincidental that you're both attending this convention at the same time. August laughed sadly. I'm attending because I need the money. I have no earthly idea why she's here, and believe me when I say I tried to find out. That woman ruined my career when she fired me from the show. Trust me, Scout. I would never work with her again. Scout was saddened by the news, and a little shocked at the hatred in his voice. It was low and contained, but it was definitely there. August turned off his e-reader and stood. I need to get going. It was lovely seeing you, Scout. Hopefully I'll catch you again before the convention is over. He walked away just as Taylor climbed out of the pool. Who was that tall guy? She asked Scout. My favorite actor. Taylor dried herself with a towel and took the newly departed chair. Can I ask you something? Sure, Scout said. Is there something going on? What do you mean? Well, when we were driving here last night and we passed that dead cow, you seemed weird. And then you got even weirder when I talked about hanging out with Garth. Scout sighed. I just can't get some things out of my head. Taylor sat up. What? With what I saw yesterday, and with what Dante saw in the bathroom. You think there's a copycat here? Taylor asked. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Taylor's voice got a little louder. Well, there isn't any real proof there's a killer running around. There's that one dead guy, but the cops didn't find him, right? Taylor nodded. Do you want to leave? Scout asked. Taylor shook her head. We can stay. Besides, if there is another killer, I can't, in good conscience, leave him or her to do their stuff. Besides, we kicked Jaren's and Ricky's asses last year, right? Scout smiled. Right. Taylor laid back down and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them again. Wait, that doesn't explain why you acted weird about Garth. Scout said nothing. Hold on, Taylor said. Do you think he killed that boy in the bathroom? Again, Scout said nothing. That tiny boy? Taylor joked. The dead guy was tiny too, Scout said defensively. Besides, you're forgetting that tiny boy has a giant friend. Chapter 21. Dante awoke when he heard the bathroom door open. His hands felt numb behind him. He didn't sleep well that night, waking up often and finding himself still in this tub. He'd seen Garth use the toilet earlier, but the curtain had been closed, so Garth hadn't even noticed him in the tub. Dante had seen his small frame through the curtain, though, and did his best not to draw attention. He didn't know what Garth would do if he knew he was there. The familiar, imposing figure of Panzer appeared over him now, smiling down. "Today's the day," the giant said. "I had to convince Garth there was no time to take a shower. I don't want him knowing you're in here." Dante didn't try to speak with the tape still over his mouth. He felt tears falling down the side of his face, heard them fall on the porcelain. "I'm sorry for what's about to happen to you," Panzer went on. "If you want, I could knock you out so you don't feel the explosion." He raised his eyebrows and seemed genuinely curious. Dante was disgusted and merely shook his head. "Have it your way." Panzer kissed his forehead. "Goodbye, sweet Dante." Scout and Taylor found Duke outside the ballroom, scanning tickets from the many attendees. "I need to borrow your laptop," she told him. "What the hell for?" "I need to look up something." "Use your phone." "I don't have a data plan, fool. Please? It's important." He stared at her for a moment and then sighed. "Only you would insult me and then ask for a favor. Fine, but don't go snooping through my stuff." She waved his words away. "I already know about your incredibly disturbing porn. Thanks." She and Taylor headed for the escalator. Scout came to a dead stop when she saw Panzer and Garth coming up. They were dressed in their superhero costumes again. Panzer was holding that giant gray hammer and grinning at them. She grinned back as she headed down. "Hello, ladies," Panzer said, nodding toward them. "Hey," Scout said. "Hey, Garth," Taylor said. He smiled nervously, but said nothing. His face turned bright red. Scout couldn't help herself. She kept her eyes on them as she rode down the escalator. Garth didn't seem to notice, but Panzer did. He stared back as he walked toward the ballroom entrance. "Where are we going now?" Taylor asked Scout. "Back to our room. I want to see what I can learn about those two." In the room, Scout booted up Duke's laptop and did an internet search on Panzer. She got a lot of results, but most of them had nothing to do with the giant man downstairs. She then did a search on Garth Hauser. Taylor told her his last name earlier. Again, she didn't find anything she wanted. "Try Ferguson," Taylor said. "What?" "Ferguson is his real last name. Hauser is his mom's maiden name." Scout typed in the new name and got a few promising results. An obituary showed up for a Californian man named Simon Ferguson. Scout clicked on it and read. Then she reread it. "What's wrong?" Taylor asked. "It says he had a heart attack. Garth told me that himself." "Yeah, but it feels weird to me," Scout said. "Wrong, somehow." "Like the dead cow?" Taylor scoffed. "Exactly. When I saw that cow, I got a strange feeling. Then I found out Cody had died. Now I'm getting that same feeling reading this story. That has to mean something. Besides, haven't you heard the stories about the 4 young men who died of heart attacks here in Dallas?" "I guess." Scout did more searching for stories involving people named Ferguson in California. She found another, more disturbing story about a woman who committed suicide in her bathtub. "That's Garth's mother," Taylor said. "That's awful," Scout said quietly. "He told me about this," Taylor said. "Did he say why she killed herself?" "She was upset about the series finale of your favorite show. Logical something? Bad logic? Scout asked suddenly. Yeah, that sounds right. Why do you sound worried? Because, Scout said slowly, the woman responsible for that finale is here now, in that ballroom with Garth. Oh. Taylor seemed to get it. A moan came from the laptop's speakers. Scout and Taylor looked at the screen, their eyes growing wide. Oh my God, gross! Taylor yelled. Scout closed the laptop quickly. Damn Duke's porn. Chapter 22. Garth's heart raced, his chest burning with anticipation and fear. He and Panzer sat in the center of the ballroom as it filled up with people. Panzer kept looking behind him, toward the entrance. What are you doing? Garth asked. Did you see the way Scout stared at me? No. I didn't like it. She seemed afraid. Do you think she knows? Garth asked. Panzer spun around to face him. I don't see how, bud. But maybe you're onto something. Keep an eye on this. He got up, handed him the hammer, and started toward the edge of the row. Where are you going? Garth asked, setting the hammer down in front of him. To check on something. Stay here. Be careful, Garth said suddenly. With the thing. You do the same, bud. Panzer patted his blue Speedos. Then he looked down quickly, feeling himself. Shit! What? Panzer looked up again. Nothing. I'll be right back. He and Garth had detonators on their phones, just in case something happened to one of them. Though he trusted his friend, Garth feared Panzer would accidentally set the bomb off early. He looked at the stage, his heart racing even faster. Are you sure you don't know what room they're in? Scout asked Taylor as they headed for the check-in desk. I've never been there. After Garth and I kissed, You did what? Scout asked. Oh, yeah. I forgot to tell you that I kissed him. Are you straight now? Scout asked. No. He'd never kissed a girl before. I was helping him out. Scout shook her head, not knowing what to say. You have such a kind heart, she said sarcastically. They reached the check-in counter, where an attractive blonde stood and worked on a computer. She looked up and smiled at Scout. Scout smiled back and immediately recognized her. Hello again, Scout said, turning on the charm. I remember you from yesterday, in the elevator. You had a great costume. Thanks, the blonde replied. I just wish I could spend more time at the convention. I love this stuff. What can I do for you? I was wondering if you could help me with something. My brother is here somewhere, but he's not answering his cell phone. I lost my key and was wondering if I could get a replacement. He's a really tall, muscular guy in a yellow and blue superhero costume. Oh yeah, he just went on and on about you last time I saw him. You two must be really close. She smiled brightly, leaving Scout confused. She hadn't hung out with Panzer that much this weekend, had she? She remembered the hug he'd given her yesterday, but they hadn't spent that much time together. Why was he still referring to her as his sister? I forgot the room number, Scout added. Room 224, the blonde said as she handed Scout a key card. Thanks, Scout said, pulling Taylor along. I'm surprised you two didn't have sex right in front of me, Taylor said in a flat tone. Scout looked at her as they got on the elevator. Jealous? Of that blonde bitch? Hell no. She's not a bitch. She was very helpful. Whatever. Scout turned away and grinned. She still wasn't sure if she and Taylor were officially together, but she liked to think Taylor was actually jealous. Where are we going now? Taylor asked. To the room. I want to see what's inside. Chapter 23. Duke got a text from Scout a few minutes after the ballroom doors closed. He'd been trying to pay attention to the panel, the sound of it anyway, when she interrupted him. He pulled his phone out and read, Text me if Panzer or Garth leave the ballroom. Why? Because. Duke rolled his eyes. Will do. Suddenly, one of the doors opened and a giant walked out, heading for the escalator. Panzer? Duke blurted out. Panzer turned to him. Yeah, bud? Can I ask you something? I'm in a hurry. He started down the escalator. This is important, Duke said. Panzer headed back up and walked in place, looking over the rail. Go ahead. He sounded irritated. How much do you bench? Duke asked the first question that popped into his head. Panzer raised an eyebrow. That's your important question? Yeah, I'm trying to get buffer and was just wondering. You seem fit. I bench a lot. Fair enough. Panzer turned around and started down again. Duke ran to the escalator. Wait, I have another question. I have to go, Panzer yelled up. Where's Dante? Panzer turned around and started walking upward again. I don't know. Why are you asking me? Because you were the last one to see him, right? Was I? Panzer grinned. Yeah. He went looking for you after you left our room suddenly. He was really upset about what he saw in the bathroom, Panzer said. He wanted to go home. Duke chuckled. Without his clothes and car keys? Duke asked skeptically. I don't know where he is, Panzer said. I'm not his caretaker, bud. You do like him, though, right? Panzer smiled. He's pretty cool. The smile vanished. But it wasn't meant to be. Then he turned around and jogged down the escalator. Duke quickly sent a text to Scout. Scout and Taylor walked through the room, looking at everything that was in plain sight without touching anything. There were suitcases on the beds with clothes scattered about. What are we looking for? Taylor asked. I'm just wondering what to tell the police when they arrest us. They won't arrest us, Scout said, gently poking through Panzer's underwear. Because we won't get caught. Also, we're looking for some clue as to why these guys are really here. Do you really think they're here to hurt that producer lady? To be honest, I'm surprised August Dickerson isn't the one wanting to hurt her. She ruined his career when she fired him from the show. But yeah, I think Garth wants to hurt her. You have no evidence to back that up, Scout. I know. After Cody died, though, I checked out that bathroom. I honestly thought his body fell from the ceiling. And then you told me about Garth climbing through the ceiling to get into the ballroom after I got that suspicion. It can't be a coincidence. I think he and Panzer killed Cody and then hid his body up there so no one would find out before the panel. The panel that Cassandra Fairchild just happens to be attending. Taylor shook her head. And how does the costumed guy fit into this? The costumed guy? At first, Scout didn't know what she was talking about. And then it came to her. The one dressed like the zombie? Maybe he has nothing to do with anything. And maybe Garth and Panzer have nothing to do with anything either. Seriously, Taylor, just marry Garth already and have a dozen babies. Fuck you, Scout. Scout groaned. Not now, damn it. Not now what? You throwing your little hissy fits. We don't have time. My hissy fits? You started it this time. Scout was about to reply when her phone suddenly vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out and read Duke's text. Shit, Panzer's coming. Let's go. She and Taylor headed for the door when she suddenly heard something coming from the closed bathroom. What is that? She asked. What is what? Taylor said, looking around nervously. I hear something. She headed for the bathroom and opened the door. Holy shit! Dante? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Dante was lying in the tub, his hands and feet tied behind him. She ran over to the tub and snatched the tape off his mouth. Panzer did this, he said immediately. He's fucking crazy. He killed Cody. I caught him hiding the body in the Rigelia wing. I knew it, Scout yelled as she tried to untie him. Didn't I tell you, Taylor? There was no response. Scout turned toward the door and saw Panzer holding Taylor in a bear hug. Taylor's face was red, her mouth open. No one move, he said, or I'll crush this cute little girl. Ladies and gentlemen, a woman said on the ballroom stage, it's my pleasure to introduce, for her first ever visit, Cassandra Fairchild. The crowd exploded in applause. Garth clapped sarcastically as the woman made her way to her seat at the long table, waving at the audience. She was dressed in a blue skirt with a matching blazer, looking very professional. Her white hair was done up in a bun again. Garth hated the sight of her. He pulled his phone out and opened the countdown app. There was a detonation button as well, in case he needed to blow the bomb manually. Other people joined Cassandra on the stage, people Garth recognized as high-profile producers. Garth still had no idea why they were all here. Their secret project would be announced soon. Garth almost found himself curious as to what these people had in mind. Whatever it was, however, it would do no good. He still planned to kill Fairchild. Scout couldn't move. Taylor appeared to be in danger of being crushed at any moment. Scout would never forgive herself if something happened to her friend. You won't kill her, Dante said from the tub. Shut up, Dante, Scout said heatedly. He's right, Panzer said. I won't kill her directly, unless I have to. He suddenly threw Taylor across the room, where she landed on the other side of the bed. She'd flown through the air like a rag doll. Scout cringed at the sound of her landing. Before Scout could move, however, Panzer pulled something from his blue Speedos. Don't move, he said. This detonator will activate a bomb in the ballroom if you don't do what I say. A bomb? Scout asked, her throat growing tight. Yes, things are about to get a little crazy. Panzer walked into the bathroom, ducking slightly under the door frame. I'm sorry you guys got caught up in this little act of revenge, but there's nothing I can do about it. What now? Scout asked. You, Panzer said, pointing to her, will come with me. Dante and the little one stay here. He replaced the tape over Dante's mouth, and then grabbed Scout's arm in his large hand. He held the detonator high in the other. We're going downstairs. If you draw attention to us, I'll blow that bomb. You're all probably wondering why we're here, Cassandra said from her spot at the table. She smiled at the attentive, costumed audience. It's been 13 years since the series finale of Bad Logic, and though I'm very proud of the show, I know some of you have been vocal about your feelings over the finale. The audience chuckled. Garth barely contained an angry growl. Having said that, I'm here to tell you I've been paying attention. We all have. She indicated the people on either side of her at the table. We're bringing Bad Logic back in a big way. The audience erupted in thunderous applause. Garth was shocked by this news. He stared at Cassandra, his eyes wide and jaw dropped. If anything, this news made him even angrier. What good would the show's revival do his mom? She was still dead. It's too late, bitch, he whispered. It's far too late. A girl in front of him turned in his direction with a curious look on her face. Garth grinned at her and pretended he hadn't said anything. The girl faced forward once again. Scout and Panzer exited the elevator on the ground floor, and he steered her toward the construction site. Her heart beat painfully in her chest, and she wouldn't have been surprised if the giant could feel the vibrations through her arm. It's not too late to stop this, she said, knowing it would do no good. She'd seen enough movies to know it was useless, but she could think of nothing else to say. Shut up, Panzer whispered. We'll talk more when we get where we're going. They entered the Rigelia wing and walked through a large space filled with partitions and construction equipment. There were 2 construction workers there, and they looked at Scout and Panzer curiously. You can't be back here, one large man said. The other man, much smaller, followed him. Panzer held a cupped hand to his ear, indicating he couldn't hear through all the noise. The large worker repeated himself, walking closer. Panzer shrugged. Scout could hear the man perfectly, and she realized too late that Panzer was merely drawing him closer. When the construction worker got within reaching distance, Panzer cupped the man's head in his hands and crushed it. Blood poured from his nose, and his eyes popped out of their sockets. After that, Panzer pushed Scout hard toward a wall, where she collided painfully with it. She fell to the floor, stunned, and barely managed to watch Panzer grab the smaller worker and crush him in a bear hug. She heard the man's ribcage collapse. It was a sickening sound. Panzer dropped the man and then turned toward her. He still had the detonator in hand. Don't go anywhere, he said, and then headed farther in. The small worker lay a few feet away, blood spilling from his mouth. He stared wide-eyed at her as he tried to breathe. His chest was caved in. Then he lay still. After a minute, the work noise ceased. Scout didn't know how many other workers had been in this area, but she did know they were all dead now. Chapter 24. Taylor woke up to a dull pain in her head and back. She didn't know where she was, but she did know she was on a floor. Whose floor? Hers? She was between a bed and a window, the air conditioner directly next to her, giving a comforting hum. She felt cold, but not too cold. She slowly sat up and felt nauseated. She looked over the bed and saw an open bathroom door. Besides the air conditioner, she heard something else, a moan. Taylor got to her feet and walked toward the bathroom. Everything came rushing back to her when she saw Dante tied up in the bathtub. She ran in and pulled the tape from his mouth. "Where's Scout?" she asked. "Panzer took her. I don't know where they went." We have to get everybody out before the bomb explodes. Taylor did a double take. What bomb? Panzer was happy about something when he returned. I've never killed 6 people at once before, he said, holding up a cell phone. And I found this. Now I can stop bluffing. Bluffing about what? Scout asked. This, he said, holding up the phone, is the real detonator. I lost it last night when I ran into Dante. This other thing, he held up the small device, is the fob to my rental car. Scout shook her head. I can't believe it, she whispered, anger boiling inside her. Why does everyone want to hurt me? What? Panzer asked as he picked up a body and dropped it into a pit nearby. Last year, a girl I thought of as a friend tried to kill me. One of my best friends at the time stood by and almost let her. And now there's you, a seemingly random stranger, threatening to blow me up. She rested her face in her hands. She didn't cry, but she felt utterly helpless. I'm not going to blow you up, Scout, the giant said as he dropped several more bodies in the pit. I would never kill you. She looked up. Why not? Because you're special. In a way I can't explain to you right now. That's why I saved you. What are you talking about? She stood up slowly. He shook his head. I can't tell you. Not now. It will only hurt you. After all of this is over, though, I'll tell you everything, and you'll understand. And you'll join me. Join you? She was about to ask more, but the door behind her opened up. Scout, Duke said. What the fuck? Before he could say any more, Panzer charged him. Taylor and Dante ran out of the hotel room and headed for an elevator. Let's pull the fire alarm, he suggested. No, Taylor shouted. If we do that, Panzer will activate the bomb. We have to get to the ballroom and see if we can stop him from blowing it. And how are we supposed to do that, girl? I might be able to talk to Garth. I know he's part of this too. In fact, I think he's the mastermind. Scout was right about everything. About what? Garth wants revenge against Cassandra Fairchild. This is her first ever convention, and it's no coincidence that Garth flew all the way from California to meet her. It all makes sense. I wish I'd believed Scout sooner. Would you have left? Dante asked as the elevator opened on the ground floor. I honestly don't know, Taylor said as they exited the elevator. You go and find the police. Tell them what's happening. Where are you going? To the ballroom. Duke felt like his head was going to explode. Panzer had scooped him up in his massive arms and given a long, tremendous squeeze. Then he let go and squeezed again quickly. Then he repeated that quick squeeze. Sorry to break your heart, Panzer shouted, his eyes wide and wild. Duke could tell he was about to squeeze again, but he didn't get the chance. Scout smacked Panzer in the back with a sledgehammer. He dropped Duke suddenly. Duke felt like his ribs had shattered. Panzer turned to Scout as she swung the hammer again, this time hitting his left kneecap. He went down with a loud thud. Duke got to his feet and kicked the giant in the face. Panzer's head snapped back as blood flew from his nose and mouth. What the hell is happening? Duke asked Scout, his heart racing painfully. Scout looked around for something. Panzer and Garth want to blow up the panel. What? What are you looking for? Panzer's phone. There it is. She ran over and picked up the cell phone. The detonator is on this, she said, holding it up. We have to get everybody out, Duke said. His heart was still racing. It should have slowed down a little by now. He was short of breath.
Garth is still in there, right? Scout asked. If we try to evacuate, he'll detonate the bomb. Well, we have to do something.
Duke dropped to his knees.
Something's wrong.
Scout ran up to him.
What? My heart is racing. I feel like I'm having a heart attack.
Chapter 25. Taylor slowly opened the ballroom door and stepped inside. The room was packed with people. A woman was speaking from the long table on the stage. That must have been Cassandra Fairchild, the woman Garth wanted to kill. Taylor looked around at the backs of everyone's heads. She wasn't sure how she could find Garth in time. There had to be 100 people here. She made her way down the center aisle, looking left and right. A few people looked at her as she passed, but seemed not to notice her anxiousness. She was nearly to the stage when she saw Garth. He was watching Fairchild with intense interest. He then looked at Taylor for a split second before looking back to the stage. Then he snapped back to Taylor. His eyes grew wide in shock. Taylor made her way toward him, trying to look unworried and happy. She didn't want him to know she was on to him. She sat next to him.
Hey, Bunny,
she said quietly, her voice shaking only slightly. Hey, he said.
I figured I'd check out the panel,
she lied.
Did I miss anything good?
Cassandra Fairchild just announced she's rebooting Bad Logic.
Is that a good thing?
Not for me.
Why not?
Because it won't bring my mom back. Taylor stared at the stage, at the woman who was the target of Garth's wrath. She was afraid if she looked at Garth, he would know something was wrong. She patted her pockets, pretending to look for something.
Can I borrow your phone?
She asked him.
I need to look up something.
Dante had told her that Panzer held up something that might have been a detonator. Garth stared at her for a moment. My phone isn't working right now. She could tell he was lying, but she didn't know how to call him on it.
That sucks.
I think you should leave, he said suddenly.
Why? This panel seems cool.
Where's Scout? Taylor hadn't expected that question.
I don't know. Why?
I know why you're here, he said. I won't let you stop me, Taylor. Duke lay on his back, clutching his left arm. Scout leaned over him, massaging his chest. Her face was sweating nearly as much as his.
What do I do?
She asked, worried.
Get help.
He barely managed to say that much. Scout looked at the door and saw Panzer sprawled in front of it, unconscious. She'd barely managed to pick up the sledgehammer and doubted she could move him. Blood dripped from his mouth and nose, and his breathing was heavy. She hoped he died.
Scout,
Duke said, grabbing her hands in his.
I think I'm about to die. No, you're not. Just take steady breaths. My heart feels like it's going to explode. It's not. Panzer started to do something to you, but I stopped him. You'll be fine.
She wiped tears from her eyes. Duke's face was so red and sweaty. She was surprised he was still alive.
I'm sorry about everything,
he said.
What are you talking about? Everything that happened last year was my fault. No, it wasn't, Duke. Jaron and Ricky were crazy. It was only a matter of time before they snapped. I brought you here. You almost died because of me.
She shook her head.
I brought myself here twice.
She laughed, thinking about the trip back to Fort Worth just to work a shift.
This isn't your fault. Do you hear me? Besides, if we hadn't come, no one would have known about the bomb and hundreds of people would have died. They still might.
Those words chilled Scout. It did no good to know about the bomb if she couldn't warn anybody. She was still trapped in this construction area, and, for all she knew, the bomb was still set to go off in the ballroom.
Go,
Duke said breathlessly.
What? Stop the bomb. What about you? I'll be all right.
He sounded a little better. His face slowly returned to normal and his breathing slowed.
I'm not going anywhere without you,
Scout said. She waited another minute as Duke's breathing returned to normal. He then sat up and took a deep breath.
Fuck me sideways,
he said, rubbing his chest.
That really hurt. I'll bet.
Scout helped him to his feet.
Now you can help me move that giant piece of shit.
She pointed at Panzer. Chapter 26.
Stop you?
Taylor asked Garth.
What are you talking about?
This. He pulled out his cell phone and brought up a screen with a large red button. I will blow that bomb with or without you in this room, he whispered. She stared at the phone.
Where is the bomb?
Under the table. He nodded toward the long, white table where Fairchild sat. I'm going to blow that bitch's guts right up into her brain.
You'd kill all these innocent people just to get revenge on her?
Taylor asked, looking at the woman. Just her. She killed my mom, he whispered harshly.
Your mom killed herself.
Garth looked like he'd just been slapped. What the fuck did you just say?
You've denied yourself that truth for 13 years, haven't you? Fairchild may have ended the show horribly, but that didn't cause a whole bunch of fans to kill themselves. I'm sorry, Garth, but your mom just wasn't strong enough. She let herself down, and she let you down.
Taylor took a deep breath and then said,
It's not up to you to be her hero anymore.
Garth's eyes suddenly grew shiny, as if someone had flipped a switch on his tears. Taylor was relieved to see Dante appear at the ballroom door with a couple of police officers.
Grab his right arm,
Duke said as he grabbed Panzer's left.
We'll pull him away from the door. Isn't there another way out of here?
Scout asked, looking around the area.
This wing should have a lot of doors. They're all locked.
He started to pull. Scout followed.
Jesus, this heifer is heavy,
she commented. She felt like she was pulling a bag of boulders.
If we get out of this alive, Duke said, I'm going to work out hardcore so I can look like this guy. Then no one will fuck with me.
They managed to pull Panzer a few inches away from the door.
I can't say I'm surprised,
Scout panted.
I saw you eye-humping his physique earlier. I kinda thought you were attracted to him.
Duke looked at her.
I'm very secure in my heterosexuality, thank you very much.
She laughed.
I believe you. So, you just want this kind of body? Exactly. Okay.
Panzer suddenly groaned, startling Scout and Duke. They dropped his arms and backed away.
Shit,
Duke said.
Do you think we have enough room to get out?
We're not done yet, Panzer said suddenly, breaking up the others' conversation. Scout jumped back as he started to stand. He favored his right leg, which gave Scout a little satisfaction. His creepy grin stole a little of it away, though. He grabbed the door's handle and broke it off. That should buy us some time, he said as he limped closer. We have more to talk about, Scout.
You're not going to get away with this, Panzer. Everyone will know about you. The only way you'll get out of this building is in handcuffs.
There's nothing in this world that can hold me, he said. Do you think I built this body only to have it waste away in a prison cell? I'll kill every cop between me and the exit if I have to. Scout kept backing away, too afraid to take her eyes off him.
What is it you wanted to tell me? She asked, trying to buy time.
You might want to stop walking backward before I tell you, Panzer suggested.
I don't see why you can't just tell me now.
Scout suddenly found herself falling through space. She landed on something both soft and hard. She looked beneath her and saw dead eyes. It was one of the construction workers. His forehead was caved in. Scout screamed as she realized she was in the pit filled with dead bodies.
Run, Duke,
she screamed.
Okay,
he replied. She heard his footsteps fade away. I told you to stop walking backward, Panzer said from above. Give me your hand. He reached down, but Scout refused to reach up. She stared at that meaty hand, imagining it crushing her skull. Though he had told her he wouldn't kill her, she found it hard to believe considering what she lay on top of at the moment. Give me your hand, he said again, holding up his cell phone. Or I'll blow that ballroom right now.
Hey,
Duke yelled from somewhere far.
Come and get me, you roided out motherfucker.
Panzer looked up at him and grinned. Sure thing. He stood up and headed away from the top of the pit. Here I come. This time, I'll crush you slowly and make sure you feel your bones breaking.
Ooh, baby,
Duke said teasingly.
You know what I like.
Before Panzer disappeared completely, he showed Scout his phone again. He made an obvious show of pressing the detonation button in the center of the screen. Then he walked away. Chapter 27. I found it, a white-bearded African-American officer said, looking under the long table on the stage. Everyone had evacuated the ballroom except a few police officers, Dante, Garth, and Taylor. Garth was in handcuffs, and Taylor stood near the door, unable to walk away. Suddenly, a noise came from the bomb after the officers moved the table. What just happened? Whitebeard asked. Shit, Garth said. I can't believe he was going to blow me up.
That asshole.
To the cops, he said, You have to let me out of these cuffs. Why's that? Whitebeard asked. Because the bomb was just activated, and I'm the only one who can deactivate it. Duke ran for his life through the wing. With all the partitions, the place was a maze, and he had no idea where he was going. He saw a door across the room, but he found only a closet on the other side. He thought of hiding in there, but it would be too obvious. He thought of Laurie Strode hiding from Michael Myers, and didn't want to end up in that situation. He left the door cracked and ran toward a sheet-covered table down one of the partitioned aisles. He crawled under the table and waited. A minute went by before Panzer appeared. He stood at the end of the aisle. Duke held his breath, afraid it would betray his location to the giant. He didn't doubt Panzer would actually crush him slowly. Duke imagined his own ribcage flattening his organs into pancakes. Panzer walked toward the cracked closet door across the room and opened it quickly. He searched the closet for a few seconds before closing the door and turning around. Duke knew it was only a matter of time before the giant decided to search under the table. Panzer walked down the aisle, searching under some of the tables and inside the booths that had been set up for the convention before construction began. There were quite a few places to hide in here, and Panzer systematically started examining them all. "Where are you, bud?" he asked. "I'm going to find you sooner or later. If you come out now, I'll make your death quick. I promise."
"How much time do we have?"
Taylor asked, running up to Garth. 5 minutes. He slowly opened the bomb, which was a clear, rectangular box. On one end was a compartment filled with blue liquid, on the other end green liquid. In the center of the box was something that reminded Taylor of a light bulb. It looked like it was partly unscrewed. "The bomb squad will be here soon," Whitebeard said. "And we'll be dead long before they get here," Garth said. "I can deactivate it. I built it."
"How powerful is it?"
Taylor asked, holding Dante's hand tightly. Without looking at her, Garth said, "It was meant to only blow up the person directly in front of it, but..."
"But what?"
"But this looks different. I could tell the moment I saw it on the stage. I think Panzer unscrewed the diode, made the bomb more powerful. It'll blow up half the hotel. I don't think there's enough time to evacuate the building." "Get them out of here," Whitebeard told the other officers as he pointed to Taylor and Dante.
"I'm not going anywhere until this is over,"
Taylor said, letting go of Dante.
"You should go, though."
"Nuh-uh, girl. If you stay, I stay."
"You know,"
she said,
"we haven't had that much interaction this weekend. But if we're going to die, I just want to say that I think you're cool."
"Done," Garth announced. "Everything's okay now."
"Oh,"
Taylor sighed.
"That was anticlimactic."
"Not so much," Garth added. "I changed the bomb back to its original settings."
"What do you mean?"
Taylor asked. Dread filled her chest. "I'll give you guys a few seconds to leave before I blow myself up." Chapter 28. Panzer stood in the middle of the aisle and did a complete 360. There were a lot of hiding places, and he didn't want to search them all. He decided to check the table at the other end of the aisle. He quickly lifted the sheet. There was no one under the table. Panzer turned and saw a sheet-covered ladder a few feet away. Duke could easily hide under there. Panzer lifted the sheet. Nothing. And then something struck the back of his head. He turned and saw a brick falling to the floor. He looked up and saw Duke at the other end of the aisle holding another brick. He threw it at the giant, but Panzer dodged. "Here I come," he told Duke, smiling as evil a smile as he could manage. He wanted to scare the little man before he killed him. Duke turned and ran away. Panzer limped after him. As soon as he reached the end of the aisle, something smashed into his face. He fell on his back, close to passing out. Feeling so helpless angered him more than anything. He looked up through blurry eyes and saw little Scout holding that damn sledgehammer. With help from Duke, they raised it and then dropped it on Panzer's stomach. He felt an explosion of pain before he passed out. Scout tried to open the door, but the handle was gone.
"Is this really how doors work?"
she asked angrily.
"Yes, Scout. Handles are important to doors. How do we get out?"
Scout looked up toward the ceiling. It had many missing tiles, and she could see the rafters above.
"Let's Jurassic Park this bitch,"
she suggested. Duke looked up, and then back to her. Then he smiled. They pulled up a ladder and climbed.
"Stay on the beams,"
Scout said as they headed through the maze of steel and insulation.
What gave you this idea?
Duke asked. He was already breathing heavily.
Garth, I think this is how he got the body out of the bathroom earlier. He must have used the ceilings to keep Cody's body out of sight. Taylor and I found Dante tied up in Panzer's room. He said he saw Panzer dump Cody's body in that pit.
Gross. Did you see it too? Most of the ceiling consisted of tiles, so Scout couldn't tell where they were in the wing. She and Duke simply followed the paths.
No, there were too many other bodies in there.
She shivered.
Besides, I think Panzer covered Cody's body with cement or something.
She stopped talking when she heard a noise below them. It sounded like something falling to the floor.
Panzer?
She whispered to Duke. He shrugged.
I keep expecting a velociraptor to pop up.
A hand shot through one of the tiles a few feet in front of them, followed by a yellow, muscular forearm.
There's your raptor,
Scout shouted as she carefully headed away from Panzer's grasp. The hand disappeared.
Oh shit, we're being attacked by a superhero,
Duke yelled.
Where the fuck is he now?
Another tile shot up, and Panzer's head and massive shoulders appeared. Right here, he said with a maniacal grin as he reached for Duke. Duke kicked at his face, but Panzer managed to grab his ankle and squeeze. Duke screamed in pain as Scout crawled over and started poking at Panzer's face. She was trying to poke his eyes, but he kept dodging from side to side. Duke used the distraction to kick Panzer with his other foot. The kick got the giant in his already broken nose. He screamed and let go of Duke's ankle. His scream quickly faded away before coming to an abrupt stop. Scout carefully leaned over the broken tile and saw the body-filled pit she'd fallen into earlier. Panzer lay face down in that pit, his blue cape covering him like a sheet.
I think he's dead,
she told Duke. Suddenly, Panzer groaned.
Help me,
he said quietly. Duke scoffed.
He must be fucking joking.
Panzer started to let out a low cry that slowly built to a fierce, anguished cry. I can't move. I broke my fucking neck. Help me. Scout covered her ears. She couldn't stand the sound of his panicked screams. She could tell Panzer wasn't faking it. He could easily get out of that pit if he wanted to. If only Jaren were here, she told Duke. He would put Panzer out of his misery.
Garth, please don't do this,
Taylor said as she walked slowly toward him. Stay back, Taylor. I failed to do what I came here to do. I don't want to live anymore. He reached inside and touched something that looked like a black light switch. A fail-safe, maybe, in case the phone detonators didn't work. Before he could flick it, Taylor dropped to his side so that they were touching shoulders.
If you flip that switch, we both die.
Garth's finger was still on the switch, but he didn't flip it. What are you doing, you crazy woman?
I don't want you to die, she said into his neck.
I came here to kill Cassandra Fairchild. You can't possibly think I'm a good guy.
What you did was wrong. You know that, right?
He didn't reply at first. Then he said, Yes, I know.
And you know you did it for the wrong reasons?
He didn't reply.
Your mom wouldn't want this, Garth. You can't possibly think that. Panzer manipulated you into coming here for whatever reason. He's the real villain, not Fairchild.
Taylor told him all this without looking at him. She could feel his body tremble as he started to cry. I know, he finally said.
I never told you why I tried to kill myself, Taylor suddenly said. I was afraid of being alone. My girlfriend broke up with me and my family abandoned me. I was all alone, Garth. I didn't see the point in living. You know what saved me?
No.
I found out someone cared about me. Someone wanted me to live. I wasn't just living for myself. I was living for her. I want you to live, Garth.
A horribly long moment passed, and no one moved. Then Garth pulled a green wire that was attached to the diode. "The bomb is harmless now," he said. "Thank you, Taylor." Chapter 29. Scout reunited with Taylor and Dante in the hotel's lobby as Panzer and Garth were arrested. 4 cops escorted the giant on a stretcher, a brace around his neck. Nearly everyone at the convention watched. "Scout," a voice called behind her. She turned and saw August Dickerson walking toward her. "What is going on here?" He stared at Panzer. She leaned close to him.
"Those guys were trying to blow up the hotel. We stopped them."
"We?" Taylor said. "You stopped them," Scout amended. "You should become a cop or something." Taylor thought about that for a second.
"I just might."
"That's a relief," August said, still staring at Panzer. "Filth like that deserves to rot in prison. Is the big one dead?"
"No," Scout said. "Paralyzed from the neck down."
"Good," Dante said. "He gets to watch all that muscle waste away. That's probably the worst thing that could happen to him." Scout rubbed Dante's arm. She looked at Panzer as he stared at her from the corners of his eyes. "I'm not going down alone for this," the giant called. "None of this was my idea." "Quiet," Whitebeard said angrily. "You're going away a long time for this, Hulk." Duke chuckled. Scout did not. She looked at August, who still stood next to her. He'd grown tense. "August Dickerson paid me to blow up Cassandra Fairchild," Panzer suddenly yelled. "He's my father, and he told me to kill her. He told me to convince Garth to make a bomb and kill her publicly. That's what I wanted to tell you, Scout. I wanted you to know your hero was a fraud. I love you, Scout. I love you like I loved my sister. I need my sister." Everyone in the lobby gasped. Scout jumped away from the tall actor. She couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Dante leaned toward her. "I think he's telling the truth. I heard him talking to someone in the hotel room earlier. I thought it was Garth at first, but it wasn't." "This is preposterous," August said to the crowd. "I've never met this boy in my life." Everyone stared at the actor, including Cassandra Fairchild herself. She emerged from the surrounding crowd. "Do you really hate me that much?" she asked August. "You were willing to put your fans' lives in danger just to kill me?" "Oh, shut up, you filthy whore!" he suddenly shouted. "I have no fans. Where were they when I was fired from the show? Where were they when my career tanked and I lost everything? Fuck the fans!" The crowd gasped again. The cops moved in and put cuffs on August as well. "I made the mistake of helping you, Dad," Panzer yelled. "Now it's come back to bite you in the ass." He started laughing. "I wish you'd killed yourself just like your sister did," August yelled at him. "She's not dead. That's a lie. She killed herself after I disowned her. I should have disowned you too. You're a bastard. A bastard!" "Lies!" Panzer screamed one last time, clearly in denial. "Scout is my sister. Be my sister, Scout." Panzer, Garth, and August were taken away. Taylor and Scout hugged each other. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," Scout told her. "I knew we would," Taylor said with a laugh. I told you I'd never abandon you. Not like in the zombie game. Scout was about to reply when she saw someone in the middle of the crowd. The figure was wearing the black hoodie and jeans, along with the familiar zombie mask. The figure turned and started walking away. Yeah, she said distractedly. Not like in the zombie game. She ran after the masked figure. When she caught up to it, she grabbed its arm and ripped off the mask. What the hell, bitch? A young woman asked. Why are you following me? Scout asked as Taylor, Duke, and Dante joined them. I have no idea what you're talking about. Why are you wearing this costume? Taylor asked her. What do you mean? Why am I wearing it? After what happened last year? It's like a damn horror icon now. Well, it isn't cool, Scout said. It's not cool at all. She turned and walked quickly away. She felt better than she had all week, like she'd finally confronted the events of last year and conquered them. After many questions from the cops about Panzer and Garth, they finally released Scout, Taylor, Duke, and Dante. Dante left the hotel's parking lot in his car, and the others headed to Scout's car. Scout, next time you invite me to do something and I agree, Taylor said, just shoot me instead. Scout laughed as she started the car. Deal. Duke got into the back seat again, but didn't argue this time. Let's get the hell out of here. If I never see the Sainsbury Hotel again, it'll be too soon. Scout suddenly spun around and punched Duke in the crotch. What the hell was that for? He asked. Scout grinned. My service engine light is on. This has been Panzer and Associate, Scout Galley, Book 2, written and read by Jerry Hart.